Chapter 227. There was an uproar. Nobody expected Rong Jin to be eliminated in such a manner. At this point, Situ Ziyue and Rong Jin, who had the highest hopes for this year's Qing Jiao competition, had both been defeated. Rong Jin finally recovered his senses when he heard the commotion around him and realized that he had been pushed out of the arena. I lost. Rong Jin's mind went blank. He never thought that he would lose to Hung Jingchua. He also didn't think that he would fall behind the top 5. This failure directly determined that he had no hope of surpassing last year's ranking. He supported himself with his arms and wanted to stand up, but he realized that he had no force in his body. He looked up in shock and saw that Hung Jingchua had regained his gentle and harmless smile. "Thank you for letting me win, Crown Prince Rong Jin." Even though he was smiling, he stood there high and mighty. His eyes and brows were filled with mockery. It was as if he was saying, "You're just SOSO." Rong Jin's heart burned like fire, causing him to lose his rationality. "You." Once he opened his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground again. His organs seemed to be enveloped by the cold air, which gradually spread to his entire body. His body gradually stiffened, and his mind became muddled. Finally, his vision turned black and he fainted. "Go and bring him back." Sun Zhongyan immediately frowned and said. Very quickly, someone went forward and helped Rong Jin up. Realizing that he had fainted, Sun Zhongyan hurriedly went forward and carefully looked at his face. His brows furrowed even more tightly. Even though he expected Hung Jingchua to win, it didn't seem to be enough to make Rong Jin faint. However, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with Rong Jin. He glanced at Hung Jingchua, but saw that the man had already left. His expression was the same as usual. "Xiansong, come and take a look." Xiansong went forward and took Rong Jin's pulse. After checking carefully, he shook his head. He was depressed previously, and he fainted because of the blow today. "It's nothing serious." The crowd looked at each other and was speechless. They had actually heard a little about Rong Jin being grounded by His Majesty. He could only come out because of the Qing Jiao competition. He wanted to use this to make a comeback, but he didn't expect that this series of events would break him down. Sun Zhongyan nodded, feeling slightly relieved. "That's good. Bring him back first, and let Zhuorong take care of him." Xiansong hesitated. If that's the case, wouldn't it be the same as giving up on the competition later on? How can he fight in his current state? Besides, what's the point of continuing the competition? Sun Zhongyan sighed. As the crown prince, Rong Jin was used to being arrogant. This time, he was aiming for first place. Now, not to mention first place, he was not even fated to be in the top 5. If he continued to force himself to compete, it would just be a waste of time. Bai Chen coughed and whispered, "That's right. Then wouldn't Situ Ziyue be unable to continue competing?" Although Taiyan Academy did not say anything, it was obvious that Situ Ziyue would not participate in the competition. As such, both sides were in a similar situation, so it wasn't too bad. Xiansong and the others didn't say anything else. Just like that, Rong Jin was quickly taken away. When she passed by Chu Luiyue, she fixed her gaze on him. That was not right. Even though Rong Jin was narrow-minded, he was capable. Hung Jingchua was of the same cultivation level as him. So how could he directly knock Rong Jin out? "Luyu, what are you looking at?" The golden mane bear cub ran out of Mu Hongyu's arms, and Mu Hongyu hurriedly chased after it. She saw that the older Chu Luiyue was staring in the direction that Rong Jin left in. She widened her eyes and asked in disbelief, "Are you worried about Rong Jin?" Chu Luiyue looked at her speechlessly. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm just worried about myself." Rong Jin's behavior was really strange. There must be something wrong with that Hung Jingchua. Mu Hongyu patted her chest. "I thought so too. You're not blind. But then again, I think that Hung Jingchua is quite strong. If the two of you fight later, can you win?" Chu Luiyue retracted his gaze. "We'll have to try to find out." After the first round of competition, the new rankings were out. Chu Luiyue was temporarily in first place, followed by Hung Jingchua, Xiao Wenling, Shi Wanwan and Su Tingfeng. Sun Zhongyan asked in a low voice, "The first round is over, and the rankings are out. If anyone is not satisfied with their current ranking, they can continue to challenge us. If no one challenges them, Their current ranking will be the final result of the Qing Jiao competition. He looked around and swept his gaze across Chu Luiyue and the others. Now whoever wants to challenge us, step forward. The entire square was silent. Everyone looked at the few people curiously, secretly guessing who would continue to compete. At this stage, no matter who competed with whom, it would be a bloodbath. However, the glory of being first was something that everyone yearned for. Chu Luiyue was the center of attention. Without a doubt, her position was the most tempting. Finally, someone took a step forward and stood out. Chu Luiyue seemed to sense something. She looked up and saw a smiling face. Even though that face was smiling, there was no hint of a smile in the corners of his eyes. There was only a restless ambition. Taiyan Academy's Hung Jingchua challenges Tianlu Academy's Chu Luiyue. Chapter 228. As expected, Hung Jingchua stood out and went for the first place. In an instant, almost everyone became excited. These two people were definitely the most eye-catching people in this Qing Jiao competition. Chu Luiyue was young, but her fighting skills were shocking. It was easy for her to win against someone of a higher level. Hung Jingchua had improved so quickly that he was not to be underestimated. Everyone was curious about who would have the last laugh when the two of them met. Under countless gazes, Chu Luiyue stood up, smiled and nodded. Please, I didn't expect it to be the two of us fighting in the end. Hung Jingchua cupped his hands and smiled. Chu Luiyue seemed to smile. You should have expected this, right? Hung Jingchua's smile froze for a moment, but it quickly disappeared. Miss Chu, you really know how to joke. Everyone wants to win in the Qing Jiao competition. However, I didn't expect to enter the finals. I also didn't expect my final opponent to be you. Chu Luiyue could not be bothered to listen to him. Hung Jingchua obviously came prepared. He purposely hid his abilities previously, and only showed his true abilities when he fought with Rong Jin. She was almost certain that he had other tricks up his sleeves. Cut the crap. Let's begin, said Chu Luiyue, as she took out the black Xian formation crystal. Hung Jingchua's eyelids twitched. Chu Luiyue's move was indeed difficult to deal with. Isn't it bad for little Lu Yu to use her killer move the moment she goes up? Asked Bai Chen worriedly. Sun Zhongyan smiled helplessly. What else can she do? Hung Jingchua is an advanced stage 4 warrior after all. The difference between the two of them was huge. If Chu Luiyue did not give it her all from the start, this match would end very quickly. By then, she would not even have the chance to use her killer move. However, she used too much energy just now. She definitely hasn't recovered yet. It's already very impressive that she won against Situ Ziyue. Even if she loses this match, she'll be second. Besides, she's not a warrior in the academy. As long as she does her best, she won't have any regrets. Bai Chen thought about it, and didn't say anything else. Buddhist Lotus Formation. With Chu Luiyue's clear shout, the first layer of petals slowly bloomed. Immediately after, the second level quickly appeared. The huge Buddhist lotus appeared once again. A powerful pressure silently spread out. Chu Luiyue had used the Buddhist lotus formation twice in a row, but he had almost exhausted all of his strength. However, the power of a level 4 Xian formation was enough to deal with someone at the peak of the 4th stage. As long as he could kill Hung Jingchua with one strike, he would be able to win. Hung Jingchua looked at the Buddhist lotus that was slowly blooming, and his expression turned serious. He clasped his hands slightly in front of him, and streams of origin power rapidly condensed. A round ball as bright as the moon gradually appeared in his palm. The sphere looked bright and hot, but in reality, it was bone-chilling cold. Streaks of white mist condensed and shrouded the surroundings. Even Hung Jingchua's hands were covered in a thin layer of frost. Both of them were accumulating their power. Then, Hung Jingchua made the first move, and threw the sphere in his hand forward. Moon Devour. The sphere quickly flew towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue activated the origin power in his body. Close. The huge petals swayed gently and then closed. Just like when he was fighting with Situ Ziyue. Hung Jingchua's sphere gradually slowed down and finally fell into the Buddhist lotus formation, completely covered by the layers of petals. In the arena, only two violent forces were left fighting each other. Although the crowd couldn't see what was happening inside, they could still feel the vibrations coming from the trembling petals. Can Chu Luiyue still win this time? The Buddhist lotus formation has swallowed Hung Jingchua's power again. I don't think it's that simple. Chu Luiyue has already fought once, and now he doesn't have much energy left. The power of the Buddhist lotus formation must have weakened as well. Hung Jingchua is the same. If the Buddhist lotus formation can't stop Hung Jingchua, then Chu Luiyue will lose for sure. Chu Luiyue stared at the cluster of Buddhist lotuses. She could clearly feel that the moon devourer's power was being dissolved by the Buddhist lotus formation. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before Hung Jingchua bang. Suddenly, a soft sound came from the Buddhist lotus formation. The sound couldn't be heard clearly by others, but it immediately alerted Chu Luiyue. On one of the petals, there was a hole that was about an inch long. The reason why there was the sound of something breaking was because there was a layer of frost on the petal, as it was inside, and it was only a small area. Chu Luiyue didn't notice it previously. The layer of frost made the petal extremely weak, and it was easily broken by a force that flew out. Chu Luiyue looked carefully, and suddenly realized that there was a faint black color on the edge of the broken petal. Something was wrong. Chu Luiyue was alarmed, and she felt a strong sense of uneasiness. She didn't think and immediately retreated. At the same time, she waved her wrist and threw out the crystal barrier. The transparent barrier instantly enveloped her. Almost at the same time, countless similar holes appeared on the huge Buddhist lotus. Then the Buddhist lotus suddenly broke. Countless rays of light scattered in all directions. A violent aura swept out in all directions. The round ball reappeared in everyone's sight. Compared to the beginning, it looked smaller, but its power was still there. When the Buddhist lotus broke, it quickly flew toward Chu Luiyue. The crowd exclaimed, "Chu Luiyue's Buddhist lotus formation has been broken." This time, Hung Jingchua is definitely going to win. The difference in strength is indeed difficult to overcome. Looking at the situation, Chung Han's lips curled up. Jingchua's abilities have indeed improved a lot. He can even break through a 4th-level Xian formation. Xingchen, even though your brother is injured, now that Jingchua has stepped in and won first place, it can be considered as helping Ziyue and the entire academy regain face. Situ Xingchen nodded. I wonder if Hung Jingchua can deal with Chu Luiyue like how he dealt with Rong Jin. In this competition, nobody was allowed to kill, but it was still possible to injure someone severely. Since Hung Jingchua wants to be first, he must have used all his strength against Chu Luiyue. Thinking of this, Situ Xingchen finally felt a little better. As for the crystal barrier, it won't be too late to ask about it after all this is over. Chu Luiyue looked up at the round, moon-like ball that was rapidly approaching her. The tyrannical power struck the glazed barrier, causing it to retreat. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. Even if the crystal barrier can protect me, I'll still fail if I go out like this. She made up her mind, and suddenly jumped out of the crystal barrier. She wanted to avoid that attack. However, at this moment, she suddenly saw that within the sphere, there seemed to be a faintly discernible mass of black. The sinister and cold aura made one shudder. Her heart skipped a beat. Hung Jingchua actually. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 229. Just as Chu Luiyue was about to speak, Hung Jingchua seemed to have sensed something. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he quickly rushed toward Chu Luiyue. He was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of Chu Luiyue. Without hesitation, he shot out another ray of force. Chi. The force merged with the ball, and the power that had been reduced increased again. It also approached Chu Luiyue at an even faster speed. A terrifying pressure came crushing over. Chu Luiyue felt as if her chest was being crushed by a huge rock. Even breathing became difficult, let alone speaking. Her face became even paler. She was about to be hit by the moon devourer. It's over. Chu Luiyue is going to lose. Why did she suddenly come out of the crystal barrier? If she's hiding inside, she can't just stay inside. Hung Jingchua is so strong. He can definitely push her and the crystal barrier out of the arena. But this time, she really can't turn the situation around. Almost everyone was watching this scene nervously. Some were already shaking their heads in pity. as if they had already predicted the final outcome. However, at this moment, a red figure suddenly appeared in front of Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue felt an itch on her cheek. She looked over and realized that the blood ferret had come out, and it was blocking in front of her. Dumpling, come back. Chu Luyue was anxious. She gritted her teeth and shouted. Blood was already flowing out of the corner of her mouth. If she could rush to the front at this time, she would be able to see that Tuanzi's eyes were burning with anger. Its fur was already standing up, and it was obviously going to rush forward. Hung Jingchua narrowed his eyes and looked at the red furry thing that suddenly appeared in front of him. Blood ferret? Seeing that the blood ferret was full of hostility, he finally couldn't help but laugh. Chu Luyue, is this your magical beast? Could it be that he was joking? Although the blood ferret was a third-grade magical beast, it had almost no combat ability. Normally, it could be played with as a pet, but in a battle like this, it would be of no help to its owner. He had thought that Chu Luyue was very powerful, but now, it seemed that she was just a little girl with an immature mind. She didn't even have a magical beast. This blood ferret was most likely raised by her for fun, wasn't it? What a joke. Hearing his words, the hostility in Dumpling's eyes intensified. Mocking Chu Luyue was mocking the blood ferret. The next moment, its small s of an eyes. Its speed was extremely fast. Everyone could only see it drawing a red arc in the air. It was actually heading straight for the moon devourer. Hung twos to the end. A mantis is a mantis to stop. The power of the moon devourer was extremely powerful. This time, it was likely that it would directly take the blood ferret's life. Kill it. Chu Luyue wanted to stop it, but she couldn't say a complete word because of the pressure. Dumpling was too impulsive. Inside the moon devourer's ball was roar. Tuanzi directly pounced on the ball that was emitting a terrible power. Chu Luyue was stunned. That's not right. She was already out of breath from the pressure, and the blood in her body was in turmoil. How could Dumpling just rush over? How did it get over? Before she could figure it out, something even more shocking happened. Dumpling opened its mouth and bit down. Crack. A crisp sound was heard. Dumpling had bitten a hole in the ball. Its cheeks were puffed up, and its head was almost as big as half its body. Crack. Crack, crack. Gulp. Along with this series of sounds, Tuanzi actually chewed and swallowed the piece of meat that it had bitten off. The huge square was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Almost everyone's eyes widened as they looked at the scene in disbelief. Even Chu Luyue's eyes twitched. What just happened? Dumpling ate that thing. Ate it. Although it looked like a glass crystal, it wasn't. It was full of condensed force. Hung Jingchua was stunned. He had spent a lot of effort to cultivate this move. Ever since he succeeded, he had always kept it as his trump card. Once he used it, he would never lose. Something like this had never happened before. While everyone was still in a daze, Dumpling opened its mouth again and bit off another big piece. The gap on the ball was even bigger now. As it moved, the force on the ball began to deplete rapidly. Soon, it had swallowed half of the ball. Hung Jingchua started to feel uneasy. It couldn't go on like this. He didn't have time to think about what was going on with the blood ferret. He had to stop it. Or else, he quickly went forward. However, just as he moved, he realized that the blood ferret had grabbed the remaining half of the ball and ran away. As it ran, it ate the ball at an even faster speed. Crack. Crack, crack. Hung Jingchua almost went crazy when he heard the sound. His origin power was contained in it. If it was swallowed, he didn't know how long it would take for him to recover. However, he soon realized that his speed was not as fast as the blood ferret's. Thus, he could only watch as the sphere became smaller and smaller, and smaller and smaller, until gulp. Dumpling stuffed the last bit into its mouth and swallowed it. Hung Jingchua's movements suddenly froze, and his body trembled slightly. It was gone. His force was gone just like that. Dumpling, are you okay? Chu Luyue finally recovered. She quickly went forward and looked at it nervously. Dumpling's eyes were wide open, and its body was swaying as if it couldn't stand properly. Chu Luyue was even more worried. I told you not to. Burp. Dumpling suddenly let out a loud burp. Chu Luyue was speechless. Why did it look like it was drunk? Before she could react, Dumpling had already turned around and looked at Hung Jingchua. Puff! It suddenly spat out a black ball that flew toward Hung Jingchua. Hung Jingchua widened his eyes in shock. It actually spat out that thing. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 230. Hung Jingchua retreated without hesitation, trying to avoid that thing. However, Dumpling had eaten a ball of force, and her blood was boiling. She moved too quickly, and Hung Jingchua had no time to dodge. In a moment of desperation, he raised his arm in an attempt to block it. Poochie! Everyone saw a small black ball spit out from the blood ferret's mouth, and it pierced through Hung Jingchua's forearm. Red blood splattered everywhere. A bloody hole appeared on Hung Jingchua's arm. Ah! Hung Jingchua's face turned pale from the intense pain. However, compared to the pain, there was more fear on his face. He raised his injured arm with his other hand, and his whole body was trembling violently from fear. No, that thing could not be touched. A cold chill was spreading from the wound. Hung Jingchua's face was ashen. Then he took out a flying knife and stabbed it into the wound, gouging it out viciously. A piece of flesh fell off. When everyone saw this scene, their hearts were filled with horror. Hung Jingchua had gouged out a piece of flesh from his arm. What is he doing? Chung Han stood up abruptly, but he saw that Hung Jingchua did not stop. Instead, he continued to gouge out the flesh around the wound, one piece after another, and some were even attached to the skin. It looked extremely bloody and cruel. If it were anyone else, they would not be able to withstand such pain. However, Hung Jingchua seemed to have gone crazy, and he did not stop. In the blink of an eye, 1/3 of the flesh on his arm had been gouged out, and the white bones were clearly visible. Jingchua, stop right now. However, Hung Jingchua did not seem to hear him at all. His body was trembling, as if he was going to gouge out the flesh from his entire arm. Some of the more cowardly people had already covered their eyes, unable to bear to watch. Even if it was a one-hit kill, it would still be more satisfying than this. His actions were even scarier than killing someone. It sent chills down everyone's spine. Chung Han looked at Chu Luiyue furiously and shouted in a low voice, Chu Luiyue, what the hell is going on? What did you do to Jingchua? Chu Luiyue spat out a mouthful of blood and raised his hand to wipe off the bloodstain on his lips. She felt the chaotic aura in her body gradually calm down. Only then did she look at Chung Han unhurriedly. There was a mocking smile on her lips, and there seemed to be ice condensing in her eyes. Director Chung Han, you should ask Hung Jingchua himself. He knew very well what he had done. What nonsense are you talking about? Chung Han pointed at Chu Luiyue with an ugly expression. Jingchua is in this state because of you. Everyone can see it. You actually want to make a false countercharge. If you don't give me a satisfactory explanation for what happened today, don't even think about leaving. Hearing this, Sun Zhongyan laughed indifferently, but the pressure on his body gradually increased. Brother Chung Han, why can't we talk things over nicely? Why are you threatening the child? Chung Han took a deep breath, but when he saw that Hung Jingchua had no intention of stopping, he could not suppress the anger in his heart. Sun Zhongyan, are you trying to cover up for Chu Luiyue? Sun Zhongyan's smile faded a little. Lu Yu is a student of Tianlu Academy. How can I let others bully him? Chung Han, you're an elder. Before this matter is investigated, it's best that you don't speak nonsense. Are you threatening me? I wouldn't dare. I'm just stating the facts. The two of them went back and forth, and the atmosphere immediately became tense. Chu Luiyue hugged Dumpling in her arms. However, she saw it staring at her with a pair of dazed eyes. It tilted its head and rubbed against her palm eagerly and affectionately, as if it did not realize what earth-shattering thing it had just done. Her heart warmed. If it were not for Dumpling, she would have been in danger today. After patting Dumpling, Chu Luiyue looked at the two of them. Elder son, this matter was caused by the student. Let the student settle it himself. Sun Zhongyan looked at her hesitantly. With Chung Han acting like this, he definitely wouldn't take things lying down. How was she going to deal with this? All right. However, don't worry. The academy will definitely not let its students suffer. Chu Luiyue nodded. Thank you, Elder Sunday. Chung Han waved his sleeves fiercely. I'd like to see what kind of explanation you can give. Chu Luiyue did not immediately answer his question. Instead, she walked toward Hung Jingchua. Hung Jingchua's attention was all on his arm at this moment. He turned a deaf ear to everything else. He did not even realize that Chu Luiyue had walked in front of him. In fact, even if he knew, he could not care less. Chu Luiyue looked at him calmly, and her gaze quickly brushed past his bloody arm. She looked like she was smiling, but not at the same time. Ah, it's already stained with blood. Then, even if you cut off your entire arm, it doesn't seem to be of any use. Hearing this, Hung Jingchua's movements suddenly froze. A look of despair appeared in his eyes. How could he not know this? He was just holding on to his last hope. Bang. While he was in a daze, Chu Luiyue suddenly lifted her long leg and kicked him hard. Hung Jingchua was not prepared. At this moment, he had no intention to fight. He was directly kicked out by Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue used all her strength this time. The two of them were not far from the edge of the arena. Hung Jingchua flew out, and directly out of the arena. Then he fell hard onto the ground. His body left a deep trail of blood on the ground, which made him look particularly pitiful. Chu Luiyue, Chung Han shouted angrily. What are you doing? Chu Luiyue's eyes curved. She smiled very politely. Oh, nothing. I just thought that since we're already at this stage, it's just right to end this competition first. After all, she still wanted to win. Chung Han's chest felt like it was being burned by a ball of fire. He almost could not control himself, and went forward to teach Chu Luiyue a lesson himself. Chu Luiyue seemed to have predicted what he was going to do. She spoke first. Director Chung Han, don't you want to know why Hung Jingchua suddenly became like this? Please take a look again. Chung Han turned his head to look. Hung Jingchua fell down from the arena. However, he still seemed to be immersed in that strange state. He did not have time to get up from the ground. The first thing he did was to pick up the flying dagger that was thrown to the side. He gritted his teeth. As if he had made a huge decision, he slashed the dagger at his own shoulder. It looked like he was going to cut off his entire arm. Chung Han lifted his finger. A ray of force flew out and knocked the flying dagger out of his hand. If he lost this arm, Hung Jingchua's future path of cultivation would be filled with difficulties. However, Hung Jingchua hurriedly picked up the flying dagger. It looked like he was going to continue. Chu Luiyue's lips curled slightly. Her tone was cold. Once the 7 coldness poison comes into contact with blood, it will quickly seep into the limbs and bones. Although you seem to be helping him by stopping him like this, in reality, it's equivalent to forcing him onto the path of no return. Chapter 231. 7 Coldness Poison. Many people's expressions changed when they heard the name. Chung Han was stunned for a moment. 7 Coldness Poison was highly toxic. Once exposed, it would spread throughout the body. After 7 days, the person would freeze to death. Could it be that Hung Jingchua was poisoned by the 7 Coldness Poison? He quickly walked towards Hung Jingchua. When he got closer, he saw that there was indeed a thin layer of black frost on his arm. On top of the badly mutilated wound, it looked especially strange. This, Chung Han's heart skipped a beat. Hung Jingchua had such a big wound on his body. The 7 Coldness Poison must have already entered his lungs, and could not be saved. He was completely done for. Chung Han looked at Chu Luiyue furiously. Chu Luiyue, you are really vicious. How dare you poison someone in the Qing Jiao competition? Chu Luiyue sneered. Dean Chung Han, you should take a closer look. This 7 Coldness Poison was obviously brought by Hung Jingchua himself. When he attacked just now, he put the 7 Coldness Poison in the Moon Devourer. He wanted to kill me without anyone noticing. He did not expect my fiend to see through his plan and turn the tables on him. He is just reaping what he sowed. How can he blame me? She glanced at Hung Jingchua coldly. I haven't held him accountable for trying to kill me. You're lying. Chung Han immediately recalled that the blood ferret had indeed spat out a ball of black stuff that injured Hung Jingchua. Now that he thought about it, it must be the 7 Coldness Poison. That thing was obviously spat out from your fiend's mouth. It must be you. Dean Chung Han, you're so forgetful. Don't you remember that my fiend spat out that thing after swallowing the ball of moon devour? Chu Luyue patted Dumpling and said slowly, just as you said earlier, everyone saw it clearly. Cheng Han was speechless. In fact, he had already realized that something was wrong and was starting to feel guilty. However, how could he admit it at this moment? If he admitted it, not only would Hung Jingchua, but he and the entire Tai Yin Academy would also be humiliated. They would become the laughingstock of everyone. It was a taboo to use poison in the Qingjiao competition. Sun Zhongyan quickly stepped forward and took a closer look at Hung Jingchua. His expression turned cold. Although I'm not a celestial physician, I can still recognize 7 coldness poison. Cheng Han, you better give everyone an explanation for this matter. Cheng Han's face turned pale, and for a moment, he didn't know how to refute. At this moment, Hung Jingchua had already chopped off his arm. Blood splattered everywhere. He let out an extremely miserable shriek that made one's heart tremble. The square was completely silent. Even those who didn't know what the 7 coldness poison was couldn't help but feel fear when they saw this scene. They didn't dare to say a word. Amidst this awkward and tense silence, a voice suddenly sounded. Miss Chu, you keep saying that Jing Chua brought the 7 colds poison himself. But do you have any evidence? Chu Luyue narrowed his eyes. Why is this Situ Xingchen so dramatic? What has this matter got to do with her? Situ Xingchen stepped forward and said, although your blood ferret spat out the 7 coldness poison after it swallowed the moon devourer, there's no 7 coldness poison in it. What if the 7 coldness poison wasn't in the moon devourer, and the blood ferret brought it with him? A strange light flashed across her eyes. If there's really no problem between you and the blood ferret, why did you leave the crystal barrier despite knowing that the moon devourer was powerful? Eldest Princess Situ, your question is interesting. I'm clearly the one who was harmed, but you want me to prove my innocence? Chu Luyue knitted his brows. Situ Xingchen calmly said, Jing Chua is powerful. Jing Chua is very powerful. He is more than 1 level higher than you. He can win against you no matter how he fights. Why would he use such a despicable method? Chu Luyue laughed out loud when she heard this. It seems like eldest Princess Situ doesn't want to admit that I won against Situ Ziyue earlier. If I didn't see wrongly, he's still resting behind you. It's hard for him to even stand up. Situ Xingchen's expression changed slightly. It's fine to talk about other things, but Chu Luyue is clearly humiliating me on purpose when he talks about my brother. That's just... Since I can win against Situ Ziyue, why can't I win against Hung Jingchua? As for why he used such a method when he's so strong, only he knows. Chu Luyue's lips curved up slightly, and he revealed a meaningful smile. After all, he even did something to Rong Jin. Once this sentence came out, it was no different from a clap of thunder. After being dazed for a while, everyone was in an uproar. Chu Luyue's words clearly meant, Luyu, is what you said true? Asked Sun Zhongyan anxiously with tightly knitted brows. He was also poisoned. If you don't believe me, you can go and check. Oh, Director Cheng Han and eldest Princess Situ should also take a look, in case you say that we did something in secret. Chu Luyue generously lifted his chin. He's still over there. Sun Zhongyan and the rest hurriedly walked over. Zhuarong, who was looking after Rong Jin, was confused. 7 coldness poison? I didn't notice it. Xian Song rushed over first and grabbed Rong Jin's wrist again, as his expression became increasingly solemn. He had already checked Rong Jin's pulse once, but he didn't find anything. It was the same this time. What did Chu Luyue say? He turned around hesitantly. Sun Zhongyan hurriedly asked, how is it? Xian Song and Zhuarong fell silent. Sun Zhongyan's heart sank. At this point, Cheng Han had already walked over. He glanced at the unconscious Rong Jin and coldly shouted, why are you still here? Isn't he fine? How is he poisoned? Chu Luyue, even if you're lying, you can't say something that can't be exposed so easily, right? What else do you have to say now? Chu Luyue looked at Zhuarong. Teacher Zhuarong, please cut Rong Jin's finger. Zhuarong didn't know what was going on, but he still did as he was told. A silver light flashed, and a wound appeared on Rong Jin's finger. Red blood quickly seeped out. But soon, the blood droplet quickly condensed, and was covered with a thin layer of black frost. Zhuarong was shocked. It's indeed 7 coldness poison. Everyone was shocked. Cheng Han's words were stuck in his throat. Xian Song went closer and carefully checked before saying, "It's indeed 7 coldness poison. It's definitely 7 coldness poison. It's just that the dosage is very small, so it can't be seen from the outside." As he spoke, guilt and self-blame grew in his heart. We actually didn't notice it earlier. If we let the 7 coldness poison spread, Rong Jin would have died. Zhuarong hurriedly took out a pill and fed it to Rong Jin. Even though it couldn't cure the poison, it could temporarily suppress it. Even Sun Zhongyan was a little scared. Rong Jin was the crown prince after all. If something really happened to him, the academy couldn't escape the blame. Chu Luiyue looked at Cheng Han and Situ Xingchen. The person who fought with Rong Jin just now was Hung Jingchua. Could it be that the 7 colds poison in his body was also sent by me through the air? Love Network has a much better reading experience. Chapter 232. Cheng Han was speechless. The 7 coldness poison in Rong Jin's body was the best evidence. Even if he wanted to refute, he could not think of a single word at this point. He only felt embarrassed. This was even more so for Situ Xingchen. Previously, she was the one who suspected Chu Luiyue, and she was also the one who asked Chu Luiyue to take out the evidence. Now everything was clear. Countless pairs of eyes landed on her, making her feel uneasy. So Rong Jin was poisoned too. This must be Hung Jingchua's doing. Yeah, Chu Luiyue never interacted with Rong Jin from the start to the end. How could it be her? I knew it. Rong Jin and Hung Jingchua are clearly of the same level. So how could Hung Jingchua win so easily? It turns out that he used such despicable means. I think that he might not have won the previous competitions with his true abilities. I really don't know how Taiyin Academy teaches people to do such a thing. Also, Situ Xingchen has been speaking up for her academy's people from the start. Hung Jingchua clearly did something wrong, but she's suspicious. Rumors say that she's understanding, generous, and smart. Why can't I tell? Hey, it's just a rumor. You'll only know if it's true when you see it. Don't you think that she seems to be targeting Chu Luiyue? Could it be that Chu Luiyue offended her because he argued with her the day before? That's hard to say. After all, she's the high and mighty eldest princess. All sorts of discussions were like sharp knives that harshly pierced her body, making her feel extremely embarrassed and in pain. Situ Xingchen had been pampered since she was young. Even her father had never flared up at her. When had she ever been criticized like this? Situ Xingchen felt her face burning, and she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Cheng Han, your student used such despicable means to win in the Qingjiao competition. Don't you have an explanation? Said Sun Zhongyan coldly with a solemn expression. That's right. The nature of this matter is very bad. We can't let it go just like that. Fu Yunshan, who had been sitting at the side and watching the competition, finally expressed his stance with an equally solemn expression. Previously, someone from Nanfeng Academy had also fought with Hung Jingchua. Besides, who knew if there was anyone else besides Hung Jingchua who was doing this? The two of them interrogated Cheng Han, causing him to feel extremely embarrassed. I don't know about this either. You are the dean, and he is a student of your academy. Whether you know it or not, you have to take responsibility for this matter, right? Sun Zhongyan interrupted him. Cheng Han felt extremely sullen in his heart. He really didn't know. If he had known, he would never have let Hung Jingchua come. Furthermore, he wouldn't speak up for him. Just now, he thought that Taiyin Academy would still be the #1 warrior this year. However, in the blink of an eye, not only did they lose the #1 spot, but they even became the target of public criticism. In a moment of desperation, he could only look at Hung Jingchua and scold him. Speak. Where did you get this from? The 7 colds poison was not a poison that ordinary people could obtain. Hung Jingchua didn't come from a prestigious family and had always kept a low profile in school. This 7 coldness poison really came out of nowhere. However, Hung Jingchua ignored Cheng Han. He just lay on the ground, curled up into a ball, and trembled all over. Speak. Cheng Han wanted to walk over and kick him, But he remembered that he had the 7 coldness poison in his body, and stopped in his tracks. Hung Jingshua still didn't respond. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. He suddenly thought of something, and walked over to Hung Jingshua. "Luyu, be careful!" Sun Zhongyan hurriedly shouted. Chu Luiyue shook his head, indicating that he didn't need to worry. He took a few more steps forward and took a closer look. When he took a look, his expression changed slightly. "He's dying." "What?" Everyone was shocked. Sun Zhongyan and Fu Yunshan immediately went forward. They saw that Hung Jingshua's broken arm had already frozen, and it had even spread to his entire face. The poison had taken effect. At this stage, there was only death for him. He would die soon, and there was no way to save him. Why did the poison take effect so quickly? Fu Yunshan frowned and asked. There should still be poison in his body. It was triggered by the 7 coldness poison, so. Sun Zhongyan's words cast a shadow over everyone's hearts. If that was the case, it proved that Hung Jingshua was under someone's orders. But in his current state, they would definitely not be able to find out who was behind this. Fu Yunshan was a little anxious. Is there no way to save his life first? Once we find out. Before he could finish, Hung Jingshua's body suddenly trembled violently. He let out a painful whimper between his lips and teeth. It was like a cry of despair in the dark night. It sent chills down everyone's spines. Soon his movements gradually quieted down. Finally, there was no more sound. Fu Yunshan and Sun Zhongyan looked at each other, their eyes filled with worry. Chu Luiyue had already accepted this fact. He gently comforted Dumpling, who was in his arms, and fell into deep thought. No wonder Hung Jingshua was so flustered when he was injured. He was not only worried about the 7 coldness poison, but he was also worried that it would trigger the other poisons in his body. The other poisons must be something that the person behind him used to control him. In the end, he was just a pawn. But who was the person behind him? There was no need for that person to come in first place in the Qing Jiao competition. What was the reason? Fu Yunshan thought for a while and said, although he's already dead, if we can find out what the poison in his body is, we might be able to gain something. Cheng Han, you won't object to this, right? What could Cheng Han say? He could only agree. Since things have already come to this, we should naturally discuss this together. We can also use this opportunity to clear Tai Yan Academy's name. He did not want his reputation to be tarnished because of Hung Jingshua. However, at that moment, a black fog suddenly emerged from Hung Jingshua's body. Cold, sinister. Chu Luiyue felt a strong sense of uneasiness. In the next moment, the black fog quickly spread and enveloped Hung Jingshua completely. Then, his body started to corrode at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, his corpse transformed into a pool of blood on the ground and completely disappeared. The black fog also dissipated and disappeared without a trace. Only the messy bloodstains on the ground were left, indicating what had just happened. Digression. I went out for a day yesterday and accidentally fell asleep at night. Today's update will be updated at around midnight. I did not update on time, so I owe you one. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 233. No one had expected things to turn out this way. Now there were no clues at all. They could not find anything at all. Cheng Han wanted to get to the bottom of this matter more than anyone else. Now that things had turned out this way, it was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. Let's put this matter aside for now. After the Qing Jiao competition ends, we'll start investigating immediately. Sun Zhongyan said in a low voice. With such a thing happening, their hearts were filled with worry. However, it was obvious that the other party was meticulous and ruthless. It was definitely not something they could find out in a day or two. The Qing Jiao competition had to continue. Fu Yunshan glanced at Cheng Han, as if he was looking at a joke. At this moment, the people from Tai Yan Academy were probably the ones who felt the most heartbroken. They did not know that such a huge scourge was hiding in the academy. Now that they thought about it, they felt extremely disgusted. All right. Hung Jingshua is a student of Tai Yan Academy after all. I think we should let Brother Cheng Han handle this matter. We'll assist you. How about that? Cheng Han almost could not maintain his composure anymore. Whatever you say, It's the truth. Then, he turned around and returned to his seat. It was obvious that he did not want to speak anymore. Even so, he felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. If he did not get to the bottom of this, he and the entire Taiyan Academy would not be able to clear their names. Not only did he not get first place, but he also got himself into trouble. What was this? Chu Luyue put away her thoughts and smiled at Xiao Wenling and the rest. Oh right, according to the rules, you guys can continue to challenge me? Xiao Wenling and the rest, who were suddenly called out, shuddered and quickly shook their heads. No. I'm not challenging you. I'm not challenging you either. I am injured. I'm not going to compete. I think my ranking is quite good. Chu Luyue raised her brows. It was fine if they did not want to challenge her. Why did they make it seem like she was some demon? Looking at them, those who did not know would think that she was very scary. However, she did not know that she was indeed a very terrifying existence in their eyes. No, it should be said that most of the people in the square thought so. The scene of her blood ferret swallowing Hung Jingchua's moon devourer was still deeply imprinted in everyone's minds, and they couldn't forget it. At this time, who would be so reckless as to challenge Chu Luyue? What if the blood ferret bit his neck? Are you sure you don't want to continue? No. Several people denied in unison. Chu Luyue's red lips curved into a brilliant smile. If that's the case, elder son, is the warrior competition over? Only then did Sun Zhongyan regain his senses. That's right. If no one challenged him then, Chu Luyue would be the true #1 warrior. His originally worried mood immediately lightened up, and the wrinkles on his face bloomed into a smile. I declare, the champion of this year's Qingjiao competition is Tianlu Academy's Chu Luyue. Hung Jingchua aside, Chu Luyue winning first place still made everyone from the Tianlu Academy celebrate. One had to know that they had not won first place for 3 whole years. With such a powerful genius, they naturally basked in the glory. Nanfeng Academy was still alright, but Taiyan Academy was utterly humiliated. They were full of confidence when they came, but who knew that things would turn out like this? Cheng Han took a deep breath and kept persuading himself. Being #1 in the warrior competition is not a big deal. There are still Xian Masters and Celestial Physician after them. The 3 Xian Master Academies are considered to be on par. No one knows who will win in the end. However, I still have Situ Xingchen. As long as I can become #1 in the Celestial Physician competition, I can redeem myself. Luyu, after the Qingjiao competition ends, you can choose from any of the 3 academies and enter their library. You can borrow books for free for a month. Have you thought of which academy you want to go to? Asked Sun Zhongyan cheerfully. Chu Luyue thought for a while and smiled. I haven't thought about it yet. Sun Zhongyan did not mind. Then, think about it again. The Qingjiao competition will end in 2 days. It's the same for your selection. Nobody expected this girl to win first place, so it was normal for her to not think about it. Chu Luyue obediently agreed and returned to her seat. Xiyang was dazed. You actually won first place, Luyu. Are you still going to participate in the Xian Master competition? Why not? Asked Chu Luyue. I'm sitting in the Xian Master seat. Xiyang said sincerely. You've already won first place. You've already gotten first place in the warrior tournament and defeated so many people. You don't have to worry about us, do you? Chu Luyue stared at him intently. Didn't you say that the Qingjiao competition's rewards are very generous? Xiyang covered his face in despair. It's all my fault for saying that. The 3rd day of the competition ended just like that. The news of Chu Luyue winning first place quickly spread throughout the imperial city. At the same time, many people also knew that Hung Jingchua had poisoned her. At night at Crown Prince Mansion, Rong Jin lay on the bed with a pale face. Chu Xianmin was carefully serving him in front of the bed. However, her gaze was somewhat erratic. In actual fact, she was listening to Zhuorong and the Empress talking outside the screen. It's our negligence that caused His Highness to be poisoned. Luckily, the dosage was small, and His Highness had always been strong, so it wasn't very serious. Now that the remaining poison has been removed, he just needs to rest for a while, and he'll be fine. This was Zhuorong's voice. In the academy, he was the teacher and Rong Jin was the student. However, this was Crown Prince Mansion, so they naturally had to follow the hierarchy. Teachers were wrong, you're too polite. If it weren't for you, the Crown Prince would have. The Empress immediately rushed over when she heard the news. Even though Zhuorong said that Rong Jin was fine, she still felt scared. Zhuorong sighed. Actually, the person you should thank isn't me but Lu Yu. If she didn't discover it early, we wouldn't have known that His Highness was poisoned. Once the time was delayed, it would be really dangerous. The Empress paused. Chu Luwe. Yes. The Empress was silent for a while before she softly said, she's a good girl. She's a good child. Don't worry, when there's an opportunity, Ben Gong will personally go and thank her. Chu Xianmen unconsciously clenched her fists. Chu Luwe. Chu Luwe again. Now even the Empress said that. Water. A weak moan was heard. Chu Xianmen hurriedly looked at the bed, and saw that Rong Jin had opened his eyes. Your Highness. Your Highness, you're awake? That's great. Water is here. Chu Xianmen hurriedly passed the water beside her over, and carefully fed him. The people outside heard the commotion and hurriedly came in. When the Empress saw that Rong Jin was awake, her eyes turned red, and she directly pounced on him. Jin, you're finally awake. Chu Xianmen hurriedly retreated, but the Empress didn't even look at her. She couldn't help but secretly bite her lips. Rong Jin opened his eyes and asked with difficulty, Did Lua save me? You can find a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 234. The Empress didn't expect Rong Jin's first sentence to be this. Her face darkened, and Chu Xianmen even lowered her head to hide all the emotions in her eyes. The Empress patted Rong Jin's arm. Jin, you just woke up, and your body is still very weak. Let's talk about this later. Rong Jin was a little dazed. Actually, he had already woken up and heard most of what Mr. Zhuorong and his mother said. Even though he didn't remember what exactly happened, he clearly heard the key words. Hung Jingqiao 7 cold poison. Chu Liu looking at his mother's reaction. It meant that what they said was true. Rong Jin's heart was instantly filled with mixed feelings. He felt very embarrassed when he was rejected when he invited Chu Luiyue. However, he didn't expect Chu Luiyue to help him at the crucial moment. If it weren't for her, his life would have been. The young girl's cold appearance appeared in front of him again. For some reason, the anger from being offended had completely disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by an indescribable, complicated feeling. She was indeed different from the others. He couldn't help but tightly grab the Empress's arm and anxiously said, Mother, I have a request. Mother Empress, I have a request. I hope you will grant it. The Empress was shocked. Rong Jin had been the crown prince for many years, and he rarely used such a pleading tone to speak to her. After all, he was her son, and her heart ached for him. Her voice was much gentler. Jin, there's no need to ask for anything between us. Whatever you want to do, just say the word. Rong Jin looked at her and said word by word. I want to marry Chu Luiyue as my crown princess. The Empress's smile froze. Chu Xianmen hurriedly looked up, but she immediately looked down. However, she had already secretly grabbed her sleeves and tightly clenched them. The Empress's voice was cold. Jin, you still have a fever, and your mind isn't very clear. Let's talk about it after you recover. She then stood up to leave. However, Rong Jin was very persistent. Mother, I've made up my mind. If you don't agree, I'll go and beg father. You're crazy. The Empress finally couldn't hold it in, and suddenly raised her voice. Don't forget your identity. You're the crown prince. As the crown prince, how could he go back on his words? Previously, Chu Luiyue was a good-for-nothing. Although he was criticized for canceling the engagement with her, it was more or less reasonable. How could the crown prince's consort be a good-for-nothing? But now, Rong Jin actually said that he wanted to remarry Chu Luiyue? What would others think? What would His Majesty think? That's absurd. However, Rong Jin didn't seem to listen to her at all as he clenched his teeth. I only love her. If I can't marry her, then I won't marry anyone else. You. The Empress almost fainted from anger. What's so good about that Chu Luiyue? There are so many good girls in the world. Why is Rong Jin so obsessed with me all of a sudden? What exactly did I feed Rong Jin? However, seeing Rong Jin's resolute attitude, the Empress didn't dare to insist. Allow me to think about this matter again. At the very least, we have to wait until the Qing Jiao competition ends. Rong Jin also knew that it was a little overboard to suddenly raise this request, so he didn't force it. Seeing that the Empress had softened her stance, he stopped while he was ahead. Then I'll thank you first, mother. The Empress looked at him deeply before she turned around and left. Her thin brows were knitted together. Zhuorong was forced to listen to this conversation at the side, and he was also very embarrassed. He found an excuse and left. Very quickly, only Rong Jin and Chu Xianmin were left in the room. Rong Jin lay back on the bed and looked at the curtains above his head in a daze. However, things related to Chu Luiyue kept appearing in his mind. Thinking about it carefully, even though their engagement had lasted for many years, the two of them didn't have much interaction. Now that he wanted to think about it, he realized that it was the same thing over and over again. Rong Jin was a little disappointed. However, once he thought about how Chu Luiyue saved his life, he felt a little happy. As long as she wasn't engaged, nobody in the imperial city could fight with him for her. Thinking of this, he looked at Chu Xianmin at the side and hurriedly asked, "Oh right. Minmin, weren't you very close to Lu Yu in the past? You should know what she likes, right? What kind of jewelry does she like? What does she usually like to do? Hurry up and tell me." Chu Xianmin almost sneered out loud. What a joke! The crown prince, who used to avoid Chu Luiyue like the plague, actually wants to remarry. He even started to ask me what Chu Luiyue likes. I've never had such thoughts about her. I really didn't consider her at all when I asked all these questions. Chu Xianmin suppressed the jealousy and anger in her heart and lightly said, "Your Highness, you should take care of your body first. I'll naturally tell you all these things one by one." Rong Jin was then relieved. He mumbled for a while before he fell into a deep sleep. Chu Xianmin looked at him coldly. After a while, she revealed a sarcastic smile. Chu Luiyue directly returned to her residence. When she went up to the second floor, she almost habitually walked to the window and looked at Yifeng courtyard. Many leaves had fallen in the courtyard, and there was no one on the rattan chair. It looked a little cold. It seems like Rong Xiao hasn't returned yet. She slightly knitted her brows and hid the faint disappointment in her heart. Thinking about it carefully, Rong Xiao had only left for 3 days. She actually felt a little unaccustomed to it. This feeling of being tied down by something was really not good. Chu Luiyue stood quietly for a while and planned to close the window. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the night sky. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something. She looked over and slightly widened her eyes. Shue shue. Plop. Shue shue actually directly jumped in through the window. It jumped into Chu Luiyue's arms. Chu Luiyue staggered a few steps and almost fell to the ground. Shue shue, why are you? Before she could finish speaking, she smelled a strong smell of blood. Chu Luiyue's expression suddenly changed, and she hurriedly helped Shue shue up from her arms. Under the moonlight, she saw that there was a deep wound on Shue shue's body. It was so deep that the bone could be seen. What's wrong? Who did this to you? Chu Luiyue's heart was burning with anger as she asked anxiously. No wonder Shue shue rushed in and directly pounced on her. It wasn't affectionate acting coquettishly, but because it was too injured and couldn't control itself. Shue shue's aura was also much weaker. It looked very messy, as if it had just gone through a fierce battle. Hearing Chu Luiyue's voice, Shue shue let out a low whimper. A pair of ice-blue eyes looked at her sadly and nervously. Chu Luiyue suddenly thought of something. Where's your master? Shue shue bit the corner of her clothes and pulled her outside. Chu Luiyue's heart sank. Something happened to Rong Xiao. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 235. Where is he? Chu Luiyue asked immediately. Shue shue whimpered and lowered its body. Chu Luiyue immediately understood that Shue shue wanted to bring her there. But, your injury. Shue shue shook its head and looked at her blankly. Chu Luiyue calmed down and suddenly took out a herb from her heaven and earth bag. This is a spirit herb. It can stop bleeding and heal wounds. You can use it first. As she spoke, She quickly crushed the herb and applied it on Xue Xue's wound. The wound, which was so deep that the bones could be seen, began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chu Luiyue was finally relieved and sat on Xue Xue's back. She felt a weight on her shoulder and turned to see that Dumpling had followed her. "Let's go." Chu Luiyue patted Xue Xue's head lightly, and Xue Xue leaped out of the window. In the night, the figures of a human and two beasts rushed out quickly. When they passed through the barrier of the academy, Chu Luiyue was a little worried, but Xue Xue did not seem to care. When they got close to the barrier, a silver glow suddenly spread out from Xue Xue's body and enveloped Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue immediately felt that her aura was isolated, and she passed through the barrier without causing any fluctuations. Soon, she left the academy completely and headed west. Chu Luiyue looked back and saw the silhouette of Tianlu Academy gradually disappear into the night. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze and realized that although Xue Xue was injured, it was still very fast. It was indeed a high-level fiend. Even if it was injured, its combat power was still very strong. However, she did not know what kind of trouble Rong Xiao had encountered that even Xue Xue was injured. In the Imperial City, or rather in the entire country Yaochun, there seemed to be no fiend that could compare to Xue Xue. As for Rong Xiao, his strength was even more mysterious. No one knew who he had encountered. At this time, Chu Luiyue didn't think about it at all. If even Rong Xiao couldn't solve it, with her current strength, she wouldn't be of much help. All she could think of was to be faster. Now that Rong Xiao was in trouble, she could not sit back and do nothing. She couldn't do it either. Very quickly, Chu Luiyue realized that Xue Xue had already brought her out of the Imperial City gates. Her expression became more and more serious. At that time, Rong Xiao said that he was going to leave for a while, and she didn't ask him where he was going. Looking at it now, it was indeed outside the Imperial capital. Xue Xue headed towards the forest outside the Imperial capital. Gradually, under the moonlight, Chu Luiyue began to feel that the scenery before him was somewhat familiar. This forest seemed to be the place where she was reborn. That is, the forest where the original host was assassinated outside the city. After passing through the dense forest, Xue Xue finally flew down in a certain direction. After landing, Chu Luiyue looked carefully and saw a sparkling lake. At this time, the moonlight was just right, and the lake was shrouded in a layer of faint white smoke, looking even more tranquil. This is the place where she first met Rong Xiao. "Xue Xue, why did you bring me here?" Chu Luiyue got down from Xue Xue and quickly looked around, but she didn't see Rong Xiao. "Where's your master?" Not only was Rong Xiao not there, but there was no one around except her. Xue Xue whimpered and walked towards the lake. Then it stopped beside the lake and looked at the lake, seeming a little anxious. Chu Luiyue stared blankly for a while before suddenly reacting. "You're saying that Rong Xiao is in this lake?" Xue Xue nodded, and its claws scratched the ground anxiously. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. When she first met Rong Xiao, he was indeed here. He also said that this was his territory. But now, Xue Xue actually said that Rong Xiao was under this lake. The lake was calm. Only the dense origin power on its surface made it look different from ordinary lakes. Chu Luiyue walked over and looked at the lake hesitantly. "He is under here." Suddenly, her eyes focused. When the white fog gradually dispersed, she saw that under the clear water, there seemed to be a silver stream of light. Her heart skipped a beat, and she immediately looked forward. There was the same scene under the lake in the distance. This stream of light was faintly discernible under the lake. It wasn't very clear to begin with, and with the fog above the lake, it was even harder to distinguish. If one didn't stand closer, they definitely wouldn't be able to detect this abnormality. Chu Luiyue focused her gaze and gradually widened her eyes. The intertwined lines of light looked very similar to a teleportation array. Chu Luiyue blurted out in shock. She never expected that there would be a teleportation array hidden under the lake. Moreover, if she wasn't wrong, this teleportation array's level wasn't low. Chu Luiyue looked at the intertwined streams of light below, and could already vaguely feel the pressure from the teleportation array. She didn't speak for a long time. Rong Xiao actually hid a teleportation array here. Chu Luyue realized that she had still underestimated Rongxiao. Such a teleportation array required at least 3 level 5 Xian masters to build. How many level 5 Xian masters were there in the entire country Yaochen? Rongxiao he actually. Just as countless thoughts flashed through her mind, Shueshue suddenly went forward and nudged her knees. Chu Luyue glanced at it and vaguely realized something. Rongxiao was probably at the place where this teleportation array would reach. We can only find Rongxiao if we go down from here, right? Shueshue nodded again, looking increasingly anxious. Chu Luyue made up her mind. She hugged Dumpling and jumped down. Let's go. When Chu Luyue jumped into the lake, she saw the white fog above quickly disperse in all directions. The teleportation array below shone brightly and quickly enveloped her. The lake water consciously parted. Only then did Chu Luyue realize that the light from the teleportation array automatically formed a barrier around her, perfectly protecting her. The surrounding lake water also avoided it because of this. Chu Luyue looked at the silver barrier around her strangely. Why would this teleportation array automatically protect her? It wasn't as if she had never seen a teleportation array before. She had even built many of them herself, so she knew more about them. The biggest use of a normal teleportation array was to connect 2 spaces, allowing people to quickly travel from one place to another. Inside the teleportation array, because it was connected to the void, there would often be violent energy flowing around. It was inevitable that there would be some danger when passing through it. Sometimes, in order to avoid this, some small mechanisms would be specially set up when building the teleportation array. For example, when someone passed through the teleportation array, and the teleportation array sensed their aura, it would automatically form a barrier to protect them. However, she didn't know that there was a teleportation array here, and had never used it before. How could this happen? However, this doubt only flashed through her mind. In the next moment, she felt her body being pulled down by a force. Her surroundings instantly fell into darkness. Wonderful book house. Chapter 236. She hugged Dumpling tightly in her arms, and sensed that Shueshue was by her feet. Only then did she relax and know that they had already entered the teleportation array. The surroundings were filled with the whistling of the wind caused by the turbulence. Chu Luyue had no doubt that if not for the protection of this barrier, she would have been torn apart by the violent turbulence the moment she entered. The surroundings were pitch black, and she couldn't see anything. Chu Luyue's heart gradually rose. Everything was indicating that Rongxiao had too many secrets. Every time she thought she had understood enough, she would realize that what she saw was only the tip of the iceberg. At the very least, this teleportation array was definitely not something that a small princely of country Yaochen could do. After an unknown period of time, Chu Luyue finally saw a ray of light in front of her eyes. We're here. A powerful pressure surged from all directions. Chu Luyue's eyes were instantly covered by white light. She raised her hand to cover her eyes. When the light gradually dimmed, she put down her hand and looked around. When she saw the scene in front of her clearly, she finally widened her eyes, and her heart was filled with shock. This was actually a sea. It was night time, and only a bright moon hung in the dark night sky. A faint light shone down, and the dark blue surface of the sea sparkled. The seawater kept surging and hitting the reef in a cycle. She was currently standing on the shore. Looking back, there was an endless desert. Looking forward, there was an even more mysterious sea. In the distance where the sea met the sky, there seemed to be a huge curtain hanging down from the sky and connecting with the sea. The curtain looked incomparably dark. Occasionally, 1 or 2 golden streams of light would flash across it and disappear in the blink of an eye. A boundless pressure spread out from it, causing people to unconsciously submit to it. Chu Luyue looked at this scene in shock and was speechless for a long time. This curtain. On the Black Tortoise continent, there were many countries. However, these countries were also divided into ranks. For example, the Tianling dynasty was considered a superior country, while country Yaochun was only a subordinate country. The Tianling dynasty's territory was surrounded by these curtains. It was also known as the Heaven's Canopy. Anyone who wanted to enter the Tianling dynasty had to pass through their heaven's canopy. In reality, this heaven's canopy wasn't man-made. It existed naturally. The existence of heaven's canopy divided the Black Tortoise continent into two levels. Empires within heaven's canopy, such as the Tianling dynasty, had rich heaven and earth origin force. The cultivation environment there was much better than outside heaven's canopy. To them, the heaven's canopy was the protection of nature, and it also represented the honor bestowed by the heavens. There were too many people who wanted to enter heaven's canopy. However, the heaven's canopy was extremely powerful. Only when a cultivator's strength was strong enough could they successfully enter it. When she was in power, she had also heard that countless cultivators outside the Tianling dynasty's territory tried to pass through heaven's canopy every year. However, only a few succeeded in the end. Chu Luiyue never expected that she would be directly outside heaven's canopy from that transportation portal. However, her gaze was quickly attracted by the scene in midair. A tall white figure was standing in midair. Even though his back was facing her, she could still recognize that it was Rong Xiao. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard a sinister and mocking voice coming from midair. "Your Highness, I haven't seen you for a while. Has your strength decreased so much?" Chu Luiyue looked in the direction of the voice and saw that there was actually another person standing opposite Rong Xiao. However, he was wearing a black robe with a hood on his head. The darkness of the night concealed his figure. Therefore, Chu Luiyue didn't see him at first glance. Rong Xiao laughed softly. "It seems that your Highness has been living too comfortably recently. That's why you came to court death." Chu Luiyue was taken aback. "Your Highness," was he referring to Rong Xiao? But country Yaochen didn't seem to have a Your Highness, right? Where did this identity of Rong Xiao come from? Moreover, she felt that the Rong Xiao in front of her now seemed to be different from the person she knew in the past. She had never heard Rong Xiao speak in such a tone. Cold, majestic, disdainful, with the absolute suppression of a superior. "Oh, I forgot that this is outside heaven's canopy. Your realm is suppressed, so your strength is naturally greatly reduced. Otherwise, why couldn't you even take 10 of my moves?" The black-robed man's voice was sharp and cold. It was as if a sharp weapon was scraping against glass, making one feel very uncomfortable. Chu Luiyue only heard these two sentences and felt the force in her body faintly become chaotic. This was caused by the opponent's strength being too strong. Chu Luiyue's brows were tightly knitted. The black-robed man's strength was at least a stage 6 warrior. But his words made Chu Luiyue even more horrified. Rong Xiao's realm was suppressed. Didn't that mean that Rong Xiao's strength was at least a stage 7 warrior? If people outside wanted to enter heaven's canopy, their strength had to be at least a stage 6 warrior. But at most, they were at the peak of stage 6. This was because cultivators outside heaven's canopy could only cultivate to this realm. If they wanted to break through to stage 7, they had to enter heaven's canopy. And once a warrior above stage 7 left heaven's canopy, their realm would be suppressed to stage 7 and below. Chu Luiyue secretly guessed Rong Xiao's true strength, but she didn't expect him to be so powerful. He wasn't even 20 years old this year, right? This level of talent, even compared to her previous life, was not inferior in the slightest. "Don't worry, even if it's outside heaven's canopy, I can still send you on your way." Rong Xiao smiled casually, as if he didn't care about the other party at all. But Chu Luiyue's sharp eyes saw that the corner of his clothes seemed to be stained with blood. "Ha ha ha. Your Highness, you're already injured and don't have the strength to fight anymore. I'm curious, how do you plan to kill me? The high and mighty Your Highness, the Holy Sun, has actually fallen to such a state. TSK, if this news were to spread, I'm afraid you won't have the face to continue sitting in this position. But you don't have to worry about these things. After all, your life is going to end here today." As he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his hand. He raised a blood-colored sickle. Blood sickle slash. The surrounding heaven and earth force rapidly gathered. His blood-colored sickle suddenly slashed down. A blood-colored light instantly flew toward Rong Xiao. Rong Xiao waved his sleeves, and a silver disc flew out rapidly. Boom! Two powerful forces fiercely collided together. The seawater violently surged. Soon, the silver disc suddenly cracked. Crack. Chapter 237. Countless streaks of light scattered in all directions. Rongxiu quickly retreated, but the crimson scythe quickly caught up. Chu Luiyue stood behind a piece of rock, but she was still blown so hard by the strong wind that she could barely stand. Rongxiu was already injured previously, and this attack put him at a disadvantage. Your Highness, let's end it here. The black-robed man shouted coldly, and the crimson scythe suddenly changed into several shadows. They all rushed toward Rongxiu. In the blink of an eye, they surrounded Rongxiu. At this moment, Rongxiu raised his wrist. Turbulent waves of seawater suddenly shot up to the sky. It formed a huge water screen in front of him. Chi! The crimson scythe rushed into the water screen, but it was as if it had sunk into a swamp, and its speed immediately decreased by a lot. The black-robed man seemed to be shocked. You can actually control the sea in heaven's canopy? Rongxiu chuckled. Not much, but it's enough to deal with you. After saying that, he suddenly snapped his fingers. A silver flame suddenly appeared at the tip of his long, white fingers. Go! Accompanied by this cold voice, the silver flame lightly landed on the water screen. Boom! In an instant, it was as if a spark had fallen into a pot of oil, and a raging fire instantly burned. Above the deep blue water screen, a bright and cold silver flame instantly ignited. It covered the sky and covered the earth. The black-robed man sensed that something was wrong, and immediately wanted to retreat. However, at this moment, another water screen rose up behind him. The silver flame quickly spread and burned over. Two burning water screens, one in front and one behind, trapped the black-robed man in the middle. Gradually, the crimson scythes that were trapped in the water screen also started to melt. The black-robed man finally panicked. He originally thought that Rongxiu's realm was suppressed, and would definitely not be his match. But he did not expect him to be able to use such a move. Your Highness, your strength is indeed not to be underestimated. Unfortunately, I came prepared this time. As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding heaven and earth origin force rapidly surged into his body. The aura around him surged crazily. Soon, Chu Luiyue sensed a ripple in the distant heaven's canopy. That man had actually forcefully raised his strength to the peak of rank 6. When it sensed the aura of a rank 7 warrior, heaven's canopy would become unstable. He had clearly intentionally stuck his realm at this boundary. Outside the heaven's canopy, the highest level one can reach is the peak of the 6th level. Your Highness, the suppression of your realm is too strong. How can you be a match for me now? The black-robed man let out a strange laugh, and a white chain suddenly flew out from under his robe. The chain seemed to be made of carved bones, and it emitted a cold aura. If one looked carefully, they would be able to see that it was covered in dried blood. It made people shudder with fear. The chain flew out and pierced into the water screen. The chain was intercepted again, but when the silver flame neared, the dark red blood on the white bones suddenly wriggled. The silver flame licked the chain crazily, but only a series of crackling sounds could be heard. Vaguely, it sounded like the mournful cries of a malicious spirit. A hole was gradually being devoured on the water screen. Chi! The last layer of flame was extinguished, and the chain quickly flew toward Rongxiu. Rongxiu suddenly looked up. His gaze was deep. He abruptly raised his hand and grabbed the chain tightly. The black-robed man suddenly looked up and laughed. Ha ha ha! Do you think this is still within heaven's canopy? Don't think I don't know that the golden body of the saint cannot be summoned outside heaven's canopy. You must die today. After saying that, he shouted in a deep voice. Ghost chain explode. Bam! 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 The white bones on the chain suddenly exploded. Rongxiu flung his wrist. The chain shook violently. The powerful force quickly spread to the black-robed man's body. Boom! A terrifying aura spread out in all directions with the two of them as the center. The two of them were sent flying by the impact of the force. Shue Shue roared and flew out quickly. It originally wanted to catch Rongxiu, but the force was too strong. In addition, it was already injured, so it fell down together with Rongxiu. Shue Shue's claws scratched a deep trench on the ground, and it finally stopped when it hit the reef. Although Rong Xiu had Xue Xue as a buffer, his arms still hit the reef heavily. On the other hand, although the black-robed man was also affected, it was not as serious as Rong Xiu, and he quickly stabilized himself. The outcome of the two of them was obvious. Rong Xiu's hand was on the rough reef. Just as he was about to turn around, he suddenly realized something and looked up. Behind the reef in the shadows, there was a pair of clear eyes. It was a face that he couldn't be more familiar with. Why was she here? Before Rong Xiu could think clearly, he felt a cold wind coming from behind. He quickly and resolutely shouted in a low voice, "Dodge!" However, Chu Luiyue did not dodge. Instead, her eyes seemed to be burning with flames. When she exchanged glances with Rong Xiu, she clearly saw the bloodstains on Rong Xiu's face and body. Ever since they met, the Rong Xiu she saw was always strong and calm. Even when he was fighting the black flying python, his clothes were always neat and tidy. She had never seen him in such a sorry state. She did not know why, but a nameless anger suddenly rose from the bottom of her heart. In midair, the blood-red sharp blade flew over and was about to land on Rong Xiu's body. Chu Luiyue didn't even think as she jumped and flipped over from behind the reef. Immediately, she pulled Rong Xiu away. At this moment, the blood-red sharp blade had arrived. It was close at hand. She could already clearly feel the terrifying pressure. She grabbed Rong Xiu's hand tightly, and with a turn of her feet, she blocked in front of Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu immediately guessed what she was planning to do, and his heart suddenly tightened. With her current strength, how could she withstand this attack? A dumpling suddenly flew out and went straight for the blood-red blade. Its small body was overturned in a blink of an eye. The strength of a 6th-stage peak warrior was extremely terrifying, and it was not something it could handle. On the other side, Xue Xue struggled to stand up, but with a few more wounds on its body, it could not get up at all. Chu Luiyue suddenly pushed Rong Xiu away. Rong Xiu's heart was empty, and in the next moment, he pulled her tightly into his arms. Chu Luiyue suddenly bumped into his chest, and the tip of her nose hurt. But at this moment, she did not care about this, and the first sentence that came out of her mouth was, "Danger! Run!" Digression. Kavinka is in so much pain that he wishes he was dead. The remaining 2 updates will probably be released in the afternoon. Kavinka is so unbearable. Aha! Mobile users, please browse and read. Chapter 238. Rong Xiu held her tightly in his arms. When he heard her voice, he suddenly froze. She actually told him to run first? Did she know what she meant by doing this? Seeing that Rong Xiu didn't move, Chu Luiyue anxiously shouted again. "Hurry!" This shout woke Rong Xiu up from his dream. He looked at the girl in his arms. She was slender, young but brave and fearless. At this moment, his figure was finally clearly reflected in her eyes. He heard his heart beating rapidly, and even the blood in his limbs and bones surged. Deep in his heart, it was as if thousands of joy were surging up one after another, drowning him. Chu Luiyue already felt the imminent danger behind her. Her hair stood on end. She wanted to push Rong Xiu away, but he hugged her so tightly that she couldn't break free. This person, he was usually a strategist who could decide victory from 1,000 miles away. Why was he suddenly stunned at this moment? "Rong Xiu, do you really want to die here?" Chu Luiyue asked through gritted teeth. Rong Xiu's eyes were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. It was like a whirlpool that wanted to swallow her. His thin lips lifted slightly, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Of course not. It wasn't easy to wait for this day. How could he die? He looked deeply at Chu Luiyue, and an undercurrent surged. Chu Luiyue didn't know how to describe his gaze, and the words that were about to come out of her mouth suddenly couldn't come out. The next moment, he lowered his gaze, and his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue's slender and fair neck. She had tied the colored glass barrier around her neck. With a light hook of his finger, the colored glass barrier fell into his palm. Whoosh! He circulated his force, and the colored glass barrier instantly unfolded. The barrier, glowing with a faint silver color, immediately enveloped the two of them. Boom! The powerful force rushed over and crashed into the colored glass barrier. The colored glass barrier suddenly trembled. However, in the end he still managed to isolate that ball of energy. Chu Luiyue was slightly shocked. Looks like this glazed barrier that Rong Xiu gave her wasn't ordinary either. To actually be able to forcefully withstand the attack of a peak tier 6 powerhouse. Is it a woman? The black-robed man stood in the air and looked down at the two of them. To be precise, he was looking at Chu Luiyue. Although she was tightly held in Rong Xiu's arms, and her face could not be seen, one could still tell that she was a young girl with a graceful figure. After a brief moment of dead silence, he suddenly laughed out loud. Ha ha ha. So that was how it was. No wonder the Saint Prince was willing to stay outside heaven's canopy for such a long time. It was all because of a woman. Rumor has it that His Highness the Holy Sun does not get close to women and is proud and aloof. Who would have thought that he would actually lose his head over a woman? If this news were to spread, it would probably cause a huge commotion. Chu Luiyue was even more confused. Why did these words sound so strange? Could it be that Rong Xiu had always been inside heaven's canopy? How could this be? Close your eyes. Rong Xiu lowered his head and gently kissed her eyes. His voice was low and gentle. Chu Luiyue did not know why, but she obediently closed her eyes and leaned into his arms. The moment he opened his mouth, that terrifying threat seemed to quietly dissipate. It was as if as long as he was around, all the dangers were not worth mentioning. She did not know where this inexplicable peace of mind came from, but she seemed to be very used to it. Seeing that she was obediently lying in his arms, Rong Xiu's eyes flashed with a dark light, and his arms tightened. Then he finally looked at the black-robed man. A faint golden light appeared in his eyes that were as deep as the night. The black-robed man's laughter suddenly stopped. Just now. Rong Xiu raised his hand and lightly pointed forward. A dazzling golden flame suddenly appeared at his fingertip. The saint's golden body. How could this be? This is outside heaven's canopy. Gee. Rong Xiu flicked his finger, and that golden flame instantly flew out. It was just a small ball, but in the eyes of the black-robed man, it was like a life-taking talisman. He retreated in fear and used all his speed, hoping to get away as soon as possible. How could this be? Outside heaven's canopy, the realm of cultivators would be suppressed to below stage 7 warriors. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for him to summon the saint's golden body. But now, Rong Xiu's aura was indeed much stronger than before. Even though he had already used all his strength to escape, the golden flame's speed was even faster. Not long later, it silently landed on the dark blue sea surface. The moment that golden flame touched the sea surface, everything in the surroundings seemed to have stopped. The waves of the sea suddenly stopped, and the waves hit the reef. Even the 2 water curtains burning with silver flames froze. The black-robed man only felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on him. His legs felt as if they were filled with lead, and he started to find it difficult to move. This was the pressure of an absolute powerhouse. He turned around in a panic and saw Rong Xiu standing by the shore, hugging the woman in his arms tightly and looking at him coldly and disdainfully. That gaze was as if he was looking at an ant that was about to die. Cold, indifferent. No one dared to have the slightest intention of disobedience. The next moment, Rong Xiu's lips moved slightly. Break. With that, the place where the golden flame was suddenly collapsed, revealing a piece of darkness in the void. That was the collapse of space. The black-robed man was horrified. He couldn't care about anything else and turned to run. But his body didn't seem to have any reaction. He looked down in shock and realized that his entire body was also frozen by that terrifying power, and he couldn't move at all. And at this moment, with the golden flame as the center, the surrounding space started to collapse. The black void expanded as if it was forming a huge black hole. Seawater, waves, flames. Everything was swallowed into that collapsing space. Soon, that black color had spread to the black-robed man's feet. No. He screamed in horror and frantically tried to move his body, but it was futile. In the end, he could only watch as his feet disappeared along with the collapse of space. Everything happened so quickly that he didn't even feel the pain. The collapsing space had already swallowed his thighs. Only when his waist was also crushed did the bone-piercing pain finally come. Ah! The mournful screams sounded particularly eerie in the empty sea. He looked at Rongxiu with hatred and said sternly, "Saint," forcefully summoning the golden body outside heaven's canopy, "aren't you afraid of being punished?" Rongxiu narrowed his eyes. Noisy. The speed of the collapsing space became even faster. Before the black-robed man could finish his sentence, his entire body was swallowed. If Chu Luiyue looked back at this moment, he would see that more than half of the space between the sea and the sky had already collapsed. The huge black void strangely and quietly appeared there. It was hard to imagine what kind of person could have such a powerful means. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 239. Rongxiu withdrew the golden flame, and the black void began to gradually recover. When everything returned to normal, the golden light in Rongxiu's eyes finally dissipated, and the deep gaze returned. Immediately, he gently patted Chu Luiyue's back. "All right." Chu Luiyue slowly raised her head and glanced at him. Rongxiu looked no different from before, but she faintly felt that the Rongxiu here seemed to be different from the one she saw before. She wondered if it was because of the so-called Holy Sun identity. Suppressing the doubts in her heart, she turned back to take a look. The magnificent sea had returned to its calm state. The two burning water curtains from before had completely dissipated and disappeared without a trace. And the man in the black robe had indeed disappeared without a trace. "He's dead," Rongxiu faintly responded with as if he didn't care. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. The man in the black robe was a peak 6th rank warrior. He actually died just like that. And there was no corpse left. How did Rongxiu do it? Although she was leaning in Rongxiu's arms just now and didn't see anything, she could still hear the movements and sounds clearly. She could roughly guess what had happened, but she really couldn't imagine how Rongxiu killed the man in the black robe. He had been standing here holding her, and didn't even move a step. She had too many questions in her heart, but when the words reached her mouth, she suddenly couldn't speak. Rongxiu suddenly took out a white handkerchief and carefully wiped the blood off his hands. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. It was the one he lent her the last time. The two of them suddenly fell into silence. Chu Luiyue then realized that her hands were still tightly clutching the front of his clothes, and her whole body was tightly in his arms. An ambiguous and subtle aura gradually spread out. Now that she had calmed down, she came back to her senses and gradually remembered what she had done. Instantly he was dumbfounded. Did she just jump out for Rongxiu? At that time, she didn't even seem to care about her own life. She just did it so straightforwardly. Her fingers curled up slightly, not knowing if she should retreat first. Being so close to Rongxiu made her face burn. "What are you thinking about?" asked Rongxiu casually as he glanced down and guessed her thoughts. "I think you and I." It seemed strange. Chu Luiyue blurted out, but she immediately stopped mid-sentence. No matter how he phrased it, it didn't seem right. Rongxiu chuckled and put away the handkerchief. After making sure that there was no blood on his hands, he finally nodded in satisfaction and looked at her. "Me and you? What's wrong?" Chu Luiyue coughed and pushed him, but realized that she couldn't push him away. She could only give up. "Nothing. I was just thinking, what did that person mean when he said that you would be punished for summoning the golden body of the son of Saint outside heaven's canopy?" Rongxiu paused and suddenly reached out to hold her face. Chu Luiyue could only look up and meet his eyes. "Coincidentally, I also want to ask a question. When we were in danger just now, you stood in front of me and let me go first. What do you mean by that?" His tone was gentle and slow, but his eyes were deep and serious. Chu Luiyue was instantly embarrassed. In fact, she also didn't know why she did that. She had a vague guess in her heart, but she couldn't say it out loud. "You haven't answered my question. As long as you tell me the answer to this question, I will tell you everything you want to know." "Rongxiu." Chu Luiyue stared at him. He was obviously doing it on purpose. Rongxiu looked at her embarrassed face and really loved it. He inched closer. The two of them were so close that they could hear each other's breathing. He chuckled. Actually, I have an answer, but I don't know if it's right. Why don't I tell you? And you just have to say if it's right or not. How about it? Chu Luiyue blinked in a daze and saw that his eyes had suddenly become exceptionally dark. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat. Immediately, his fingers slid down from her cheeks and pinched her chin, forcing her to raise her face slightly. He lowered his head and moved closer. Chu Luiyue only felt something soft and slightly cold on her lips. That familiar cold fragrance suddenly became rich, and in an instant, it permeated between his lips and teeth. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes, and her heart felt as if it had been heavily rubbed by something. It was unbelievably sweet and soft. Rongxiu was kissing her. The sea breeze was gentle, and the moonlight was bright. She could even see the faint shadows cast by his thick eyelashes on his eyelids. Rongxiu originally wanted to kiss her lightly, but the moment he touched that incredible softness, he felt as if something in his heart had suddenly collapsed. Almost instinctively, he bit her lips, grinding and sucking on them. A blazing heat spread from between their lips. Chu Luiyue felt as if her whole body was burning, and her limbs were a little weak. She finally found her reason and pushed Rongxiu. However, she was no match for Rongxiu. At this time, her limbs were even weaker, and her two pushes were like scratching an itch. Not only did she not push Rongxiu away, but she also gently tickled his heart, making him more restless. His arm wrapped around her slim waist, and she was almost embedded into his body. Chu Luiyue spat out a few vague syllables between her lips and teeth. Rongxiu then slightly let go of her, and looked at her with a deep gaze. What do you think of this answer? As soon as he spoke, Chu Luiyue realized that his voice was very hoarse, as if he was restraining something. Her face turned even redder, and she glared at him. He was still as shameless as ever. Little did she know that at this time, her eyes were watery from the kiss, and her face was like a peach blossom. This glare made half of Rongxiu's body go limp. The other half was the exact opposite. He gently rubbed his fingers on her cheeks, and with an ambiguous burning sensation, he murmured in a low voice, "It seems wrong." Then what about this? As soon as he finished speaking, he lowered his head and kissed her lips again. This time his movements were very fast. Before she could react, he had already attacked her. Chu Luiyue was ashamed and angry. In a fit of anger, she simply started to counterattack. She released her hands that were originally holding onto his chest and reached up, hooking them around his neck and pressing her whole body closer. At the same time, she imitated him and bit his lips, gently licking them. Rongxiu's body stiffened. Did she know what she was doing? Chu Luiyue felt that he suddenly stopped, and she was even more unconvinced, so she went in a little further. The two of them touched, lingering in the air. Rongxiu sucked in a breath of cold air. Digression. Congratulations on picking up a broken February mobile phone. User, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 240. I have to stop. Rongxiu thought to himself. Otherwise, he really couldn't tell what he would do. However, she was so sweet and soft that he couldn't control himself. He had been waiting for this day for too long. One time, another time. Rongxiu's hand held her waist tightly. She could feel that he was suppressing something through her clothes. The girl in his arms gradually softened into a ball, as if he could knead her however he wanted. She belonged to him. She belonged only to him. Chu Luiyue gradually felt that Rongxiu's aura was becoming a little dangerous. She instinctively felt that it wasn't good to continue like this. Finally, she took the initiative to step back. She tilted her head and leaned against his shoulder. Rongxiu's hand rubbed her waist a few times. It was a little itchy. He took a deep breath and finally suppressed the impulse in his heart. His voice was terrifyingly hoarse. If you do this again next time, Chu Luiyue blinked and deliberately asked. If you do this again next time, what will you do? Rongxiu looked at her meaningfully. There seemed to be sparks in his eyes that would burn at any time. Of course you're welcome. Chu Luiyue was speechless. As expected, it wasn't a wise choice to be thick-skinned with someone. However, seeing Rongxiu like this, she didn't dare to continue teasing him deliberately. She quietly held his hand, Rong Xiu rubbed his chin against the soft hair on the top of her head. Then he looked into her eyes and said seriously, "You haven't said whether this answer is right or not." His eyes were calm, but there was a hint of nervousness in his voice. Chu Liyue never thought that someone as powerful as Rong Xiu would feel nervous. He was waiting for her answer. How important was it in his heart that he would be so careful and cautious when asking for an answer? Chu Liyue stared at him. Many scenes flashed through her mind. She was stunned when she first saw him by the lake. She was surprised when she saw him again at the palace banquet. She was moved at Wanling Mountain. Scenes flashed by one after another. And in the end, they all disappeared. All that was left was the face of the evildoer before him, which became increasingly clear. In fact, she had always treated Rong Xiu differently, but she was unwilling to admit it for various reasons. But now that he thought about it, those were just some unimportant reasons. Even if she had a heart-wrenching past, that was all in her previous life. Now, there was someone who was willing to embrace her new life and give her bright and warm expectations. She stood on her tiptoes and planted a light kiss on his lips. Rong Xiu's pupils shrank, but there were thousands of fireworks in his eyes. "Rong Xiu." She looked up at him and said in the same serious tone, "For me, there is only one question and one answer in my life. There's no betrayal and no regret. Do you understand?" Her voice was very calm, but there were too many emotions in her eyes. Those unbearable past were her eternal scars. She definitely couldn't bear a second betrayal. Rong Xiu's heart seemed to be clenched by something, and it hurt. After a moment, his thin lips lifted slightly and he chuckled. "What a coincidence, so do I." He held her hand tightly and looked into her eyes. "When we go back, I'll go to your residence to propose marriage." Chu Liyue was stunned and asked subconsciously, "So soon?" Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. "Is it very soon? But I've been waiting for a long time." As long as he didn't kidnap her back, he wouldn't be able to sleep well. Chu Liyue wanted to say something, but when she looked up and saw his expression, her heart suddenly moved. Okay. For some reason, she always seemed to be exceptionally easy to talk to when facing Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu didn't dare to touch her again, for fear that he couldn't control himself, so he could only settle for the second best and kiss her forehead. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly stopped and leaned on Chu Liyue's shoulder. Chu Liyue glanced sideways and realized that Rong Xiu's face was exceptionally pale. He seemed to have fainted. Rong Xiu. On the fourth day of the Qingjiao competition, the first 3 days of the warrior competition had finally ended. The Xian Master students from the 3 academies were all eager to get a good ranking in the Xian Master competition today. Unlike the one-on-one competition a few days ago, the Xian Master competition was held together by everyone. The huge arena had been evenly divided into squares. A chessboard was placed in each square. There were 5 Xian formations on each chessboard. Whoever could solve these 5 Xian formations the fastest would be first. At a glance, many people were already in position, waiting for the competition to start. However, there was some commotion on Tianlu Academy's side. "Lu Yu isn't here yet?" Bai Chen asked with a frown. Mu Hongyu shook her head. She was also rather anxious. "When we went to look for her this morning, she wasn't at her residence. We thought she was here first, but we didn't expect her to be here either. I already asked Sinhu to go back and look for her." As she spoke, she turned to look at the entrance and saw Sinhu panting as he returned. However, Chu Liyue wasn't behind him. Mu Hongyu's heart sank, but she still walked forward quickly and asked, "Where's Lu Yu? Did you find her?" Sinhu placed one hand on his knee and panted heavily as he waved his hand repeatedly. "And no, I looked everywhere, but I didn't see her." Mu Hongyu was silent for a moment before she suddenly thought of something. "What about Juyo Tower? Did you look for her there? She usually likes to go there to cultivate. Did she forget to come out?" Sinhu shook his head. "I already asked. She didn't go there yesterday or today." Bai Chen thought for a while and muttered uncertainly. Could it be that she was too tired yesterday, so she went home? Si Yang couldn't help but interject. "That shouldn't be the case. She said yesterday that she would definitely participate in today's Xian Master competition. Why did she suddenly not participate? Even if she used up a lot of energy in yesterday's competition, Chu Liyue's talent and ability as a Xian master were extremely outstanding. As long as she participated in the competition, her results wouldn't be bad. Why did she suddenly disappear? Students who haven't gone up yet, please hurry up. The competition is about to start. The referee shouted from afar. Sun Zhongyan walked over. Lu Yu isn't here yet? The few of them looked at each other and shook their heads. Sun Zhongyan felt a little uneasy. He remembered that Chu Liyue had indeed returned to the academy yesterday. But why was she missing now? From yesterday until today, he didn't notice anything strange in the academy. If Chu Liyue had gone out and entered the academy, the teachers in charge of guarding the entrance would definitely know. But now, did something really happen? After all, she had offended many people in the past few days. However, this was the imperial city, and the Qingjiao competition was being held. No one would be so stupid as to make a move on Chu Liyue at this time. Sun Zhongyan thought for a while and said, "Don't worry about the Xian Master competition. Don't worry about the Xian Master competition for now. The most important thing right now is to find the person. Bai Chun, bring some people to the academy to look for her again. Also, send some people to the imperial city to gather information and see if they can find any traces. Also inform Lord Chuning." Yes. Digression. Today's February was a useless February. It could only update 2 chapters at 9 p.m., and the rest would probably be updated before 3 p.m. Chapter 241. Chu Liyue naturally didn't know that everyone was frantically searching for her in the capital. She only cared about Rongxiu now. After Rongxiu fainted, she took his pulse and found that the situation in his body was very strange. She actually couldn't detect Rongxiu's Yuan meridian. After trying twice, she could only vaguely feel that there seemed to be 2 forces colliding in Rongxiu's body. She couldn't sense anything else. Chu Liyue guessed that Rongxiu's coma should be related to forcefully summoning the so-called Holy Sun's golden body. It was impossible to forcefully raise one's strength to a stage 7 warrior outside heaven's canopy. It was just that she had never heard of anyone who could do this before. So she didn't know what was going on. She carefully let Rongxiu lean on a relatively flat reef. Looking at his pale face, she felt a little anxious. Shui walked over from the side and rubbed against her leg, whimpering softly. Chu Liyue glanced at it. "You're saying that he's fine?" Shui nodded and secretly gave its master a look of disdain. Its master was so powerful that this little bit of trouble was really nothing. If Chu Liyue didn't come, he could still go back. But since she was here, and the 2 of them happened to be engaged, it was normal for him to take advantage of this opportunity to play the trick of injuring himself. Shui simply lay down. Anyway, that man from the unparalleled palace was already dead. It wouldn't be too late to go back after its master recovered. Seeing Shui's attitude, Chu Liyue felt a little relieved. Since Shui felt that Rongxiu was fine, then there was no need to worry too much. She half-hugged Rongxiu and leaned on the reef quietly, waiting for him to wake up. Dumpling finally woke up and climbed onto her shoulder again, rubbing against her face pitifully. Chu Liyue glanced at it. Dumpling was indeed not injured. Somehow, its resistance to beatings seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. The sea breeze at night was a little salty, and the moonlight shone on the surface of the sea. The surroundings were barren, but Chu Liyue didn't feel lonely. On the contrary, this was a rare peaceful night since her rebirth. She lowered her eyes and looked at Rongxiu, her gaze lingering on his face. In fact, there was one thing that she didn't tell Rongxiu just now. When he summoned the golden body of the saint, his entire person became different. Cold and different high up above. She had never seen such a Rong before. But she faintly felt a little familiar. She didn't know where this familiarity came from. She was certain that she had never seen him before. As long as she had, she would definitely remembers. Teet. She. But when she was facing Rongxiu, she always felt an inexplicable sense of security. "Have we met before?" Chu Liyue muttered softly. Then she felt that her thought was a little ridiculous. so she smiled and closed her eyes. Her voice was very soft, and it dissipated in the night wind. But she didn't see Rong Xiu's eyelashes trembling slightly. At the Qing Jiao competition, Chu Luiyue was indeed missing. Sun Zhongyan still had to take care of the Qing Jiao competition, so he handed this matter to Bai Chun and the rest. Although they were also very anxious, they couldn't make it public now. Even when he went to look for Chu Ning, he did it secretly. Chu Ning wanted to use the Imperial Guards, but he gave up after thinking about it. He only asked a few of his trusted subordinates to secretly ask around in the capital. He even personally went to the Zhenbao Pavilion. Yan Ge was also surprised when he heard that Chu Luiyue was missing, and he agreed to help without hesitation. Chu Ning was just trying his luck, but he didn't expect Yan Ge to be so willing to help. He was both grateful and confused. The Zhenbao Pavilion had an extraordinary status, and Yan Ge was even more so as the second in charge. But he seemed to be very concerned about Yu, whether it was the previous time when he booked the entire Phoenix restaurant, or this time. It was not something that an ordinary friendship could do. He tried to ask, but Yan Ge only smiled, and said that he got along well with Chu Luiyue. Now that she was the champion of the Qing Jiao competition, her future was limitless, so it was normal for him to want to get along with her. Chu Ning vaguely felt that something was wrong. Being the champion of the Qing Jiao competition was not bad, but it didn't seem to be worth the Zhenbao Pavilion's effort. But looking at Yan Ge, he knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him, so he didn't continue asking. He only hoped to find you, as soon as possible. After Chu Ning left, the smile on Yan Ji's face immediately disappeared, and he quickly ordered his subordinates to take action. Master wasn't in the capital, but Madam was missing. What was going on? If Master came back and found out that he didn't take good care of Madam? Wait! Yan Ge suddenly thought of something and was stunned. Master was gone, and Madam was missing. Could it be? Yan Ji's heart was on fire, but he didn't dare to leave the capital. Without Master's permission, no one was allowed to go to that place. He wanted to ask Yin Qing and the others, but he was afraid that he would be discovered. After thinking for a long time, he could only pray that Master was with Madam. After a few hours, the sky was bright, and Chu Luiyue opened her eyes. She moved and realized that she had unknowingly laid in Rong Xiu's arms. His black cloak was still covering her body. Rong Xiu, when did you wake up? Chu Luiyue rubbed her eyes and asked. At the same time, she felt embarrassed. She had planned to guard Rong Xiu, but she didn't expect that she would fall asleep, and didn't even know that he had woken up. With a smile on his lips, Rong Xiu easily carried her up. Chu Luiyue exclaimed and hugged his neck instinctively. It seemed that Rong Xiu had recovered. I just woke up too, Rong Xiu said. Chu Luiyue didn't believe him, but she didn't ask for details. Rong Xiu kissed her. We should go back. Chu Luiyue asked uncertainly. Have you recovered? After experiencing such a fierce and dangerous fight yesterday, and then suddenly fainted, she was still worried. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. Whether it's good or not, you'll know when we get married. Of course you have to check now. Although this place isn't very good, it's not impossible. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and put her arms around his neck. She moved closer and said with a smile, Really? Do you still want yesterday? With a soft and warm body in his arms, yesterday's scenes came back to his mind. He tightened his arms slightly, suppressed the restlessness in his heart, and glanced at her warningly. This little thing was as bad as always. Rong Xiu felt that he had the potential to be a saint since he could endure to this point. He chuckled and turned the tables. You probably don't know, but Prince Li's mansion has prepared everything for the wedding. We can get married immediately after the marriage proposal. Digression. Lost. Pain. The remaining updates are being filled. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 242. Chu Luiyue was speechless. She felt more and more that Rong Xiu seemed to have already prepared, and was just waiting for her to agree. What if I don't come this time? She asked. Rong Xiu glanced at her. If you don't come this time, next time you will come. Chu Liyue couldn't help but laugh. Your Highness Princely is so confident. What if I don't agree? Wouldn't those things be in vain? Oh, that's not right. Your Highness Princely can find someone else. Rongxiu's tone was calm. It will only be you. If you don't agree, I'll just burn it. Anyway, it was prepared for her from the beginning. If she didn't want it, then there was no point in it existing. Of course, he never thought about this. He was determined to get her. Chu Liyue was stunned. He spoke with a calm expression, as if he was talking about something very ordinary. He didn't feel that these words were so shocking. She paused and finally asked, when did you start preparing those things? Did Rongxiu really like her from the first time they met? That ragged and bloodstained girl? Rongxiu narrowed his eyes. A long time ago. A long time ago? How long ago was that? Chu Liyue wanted to ask more, but Rongxiu had already carried her and stepped into the teleportation array. Countless streams of light instantly formed a barrier around the two of them. Their vision turned dark, and the two of them entered the void of the teleportation array. The two of them quickly returned to the forest. After coming out of the lake, the barrier around the two of them finally dissipated. Chu Liyue turned around to take a look. It was noon. The dense white mist on the lake seemed to dissipate a little, and the streams of light below the teleportation array seemed to be hidden. From the outside, it was impossible to detect anything unusual. There is a barrier outside the lake. Ordinary people can't get close, so naturally they won't find this teleportation array. Rongxiu seemed to have guessed her thoughts and explained faintly. Chu Liyue nodded, and then he remembered something. So you're saying that you deliberately let me in? Rongxiu glanced at Shui with a faint smile. Shui raised her neck proudly. What happened? What happened? It did it on purpose. If it wasn't for him taking the initiative, he didn't know when his master would be able to get married. Humph. Dumpling looked at Shui with disdain. Sure enough, the master was shameless, and the magical beast he raised was the same. Shui bared her teeth at Dumpling. Dumpling swung its tail and faced it with its butt. Chu Liyue could not help but laugh. For some reason, Dumpling did not seem to be afraid of Shui, and even provoked her from time to time. Logically speaking, Shui was a high-level magical beast, and Dumpling's level was much lower than it. There was a difference in level between the two, so Dumpling did not dare to do this. However, when she thought about how Dumpling ignored the black flying python's orders, she felt relieved. When she had the chance, she had to study Dumpling carefully. Alright, there's still the Qingjiao competition today. Chu Liyue looked at the swaying sunlight in the forest, and suddenly remembered that there was a competition today. The competition should have already started at this time. Rongxiu smiled. You seem to care a lot about the Qingjiao competition. Chu Liyue nodded honestly. The competition is not important. What's important is the rewards. Although she had already gotten first place in the warrior competition, since she had signed up, it was better to get more rewards. Seeing Chu Liyue's bright eyes, Rongxiu started to reflect. It seems that I gave her too few rewards last time. Do you still want to participate in the Qingjiao competition? Chu Liyue shrugged. I'm afraid I won't be able to make it in time if I go back now. Rongxiu smiled faintly. If you want to participate, you can still make it in time. Yan Ge had been anxiously waiting for Chu Liyue's news in Zhenbao Pavilion. As he was worried that he would alert the enemy, he did not go out personally. Instead, he secretly sent out many people. However, time passed by bit. It was almost noon, but there was still no movement. His heart was in his mouth. He thought that if he still couldn't find her in the evening, he would have to resort to extreme measures. Just as he was waiting impatiently, he suddenly sensed something and took out a palm-sized compass from his bosom. That compass was used by his master to send messages. In all these years, his master had only used it less than 3 times. He did not expect it to be used now. The purple jade needle on the compass shook a few times before finally pointing in a certain direction. Yan Ge did not hesitate and rushed out. Jianan Square. The entire square was very quiet. The arena was filled with participating Xian masters. As the Xian master competition required more concentration, everyone consciously kept quiet. However, The atmosphere of the competition was getting more and more tense. Bang! A soft sound was heard. In the arena, 3 stars lit up on the stone platform in front of a Xian master. That meant that he had already solved the first 3 Xian formations. That's Sheng Yiming from Nanfeng Academy. He's only 18 years old this year, but he's already a level 4 Xian master. He's considered one of the best among these students. There are less than 10 people in this arena who are stronger than a level 4 Xian master, right? In the end, the first place should be decided among these people. Look, Shi Wanwan has also solved 3 formations. The Xian masters from Nanfeng Academy seem to be very powerful. Speaking of which, elder son from Tianlu Academy is also a Xian master. Logically speaking, the Xian masters he nurtured should be very outstanding. Why hasn't anyone from their academy solved the 3rd formation yet? That Siting seems to be his student, right? I heard that he's quite powerful, but I don't know how he compares to the others. Hey, isn't Chu Luyue also a Xian master? She can even activate a level 4 black crystal Xian formation. Why isn't she here today? In the arena, Siting held a chess piece and didn't place it down for a long time. He turned his head to look at the empty seat beside him and slightly furrowed his brows. Chu Luyue isn't here yet. According to her personality, there's no reason for her to not participate in the competition after signing up. Master also seemed to be a little anxious just now. I wonder if it has something to do with Chu Luyue. He thought for a while, suppressed the uneasiness in his heart, and placed that chess piece down. Bang! The 3rd formation was solved easily. Quick look. Siting solved it too. He seems to be a level 4 Xian master too, but his ranking is still quite low. It seems like Nanfeng Academy is going to be first. The crowd discussed softly. Situ Xingchen sat in her seat and seemed to be watching the situation in the arena, but her gaze kept darting to Tianlu Academy's side. Chu Luyue actually didn't show up today. Cheng Han noticed her gaze and naturally guessed what she was thinking. He sneered. Xingchen, you don't have to look anymore. That Chu Luyue must be scared, so she ran away at the last minute. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 243. Situ Xingchen said hesitantly, no way. She even activated a 4th level Xian crystal Xian formation yesterday. If she's here to compete, she shouldn't be too bad. Cheng Han didn't think much of it. You've been focusing on Celestial Physician, so you naturally don't know about the tricks of the Xian Master competition. Even though the Xian Crystal Xian formation is a 4th level one, it can't be activated by only a 4th level Xian Master. You have to know that this thing was originally engraved to make it convenient for mystic cultivators to quickly unleash mystic formations during battle and increase their combat strength. It's not that difficult to activate it. Chu Luyue is only a stage 2 Xian master now. He only got 1st place in the warrior competition because of some unorthodox methods. The so-called unorthodox methods were naturally referring to her blood ferret. Cheng Han thought for a day and still couldn't figure out how the blood ferret could directly swallow Hung Jingchua's force. However, there must be a reason for this abnormality. In his eyes, Chu Luyue didn't get 1st place with his own abilities. Hence, he actually didn't think highly of Chu Luyue. There were too many variables in the previous one-on-one competition. However, this Xian Master competition is different. You can tell the difference with one look. Situ Xingchen nodded lightly. Actually, she agreed with Cheng Han's point of view. However, based on Tianlu Academy's reaction, something seemed amiss. Did something really happen to Chu Luyue? Situ Xingchen watched for a while and was curious. However, it wasn't easy to find out in public. That's true. There was another matter that made her feel uncomfortable. After yesterday's competition ended, she sent someone to find out about Princely Mansion. However, Princely Mansion was heavily guarded, so she didn't get any useful information. She was a little disappointed, but on second thought, that person always did things this way, so it was normal. Besides, this was the Imperial City. He would definitely be more careful than before. Luckily, there were some rumors about Princely Mansion in the Imperial City, so she more or less heard about it. However, she was even more surprised after hearing about it. That person had returned to the imperial city for a month, but he didn't even leave the residence. The only time he went out was to attend the crown prince's birthday banquet. Most importantly, it was rumored that he had helped Chu Luiyue during the palace banquet. The rumors in the streets were more or less exaggerated. After all, outsiders did not know about the matters in the palace, so no one knew exactly what had happened. She didn't want to believe it from the bottom of her heart. She only thought that it was just a hearsay made up by everyone after dinner. According to that person's character, why would he help for no reason? Even if he did, there should be other reasons. After all, Chu Luiyue was still Crown Prince Rongjin's fiancé back then. He probably wouldn't even spare a second glance at a woman like her. Situ Xingqian could only console herself like this. However, there was another matter that she found even stranger. He actually went to Tianlu Academy. On the surface, it was said that he was doing this to pay respects to his mother. However, he had not done this for so many years. This time, he must have other motives. However, she did not know what attracted him to Tianlu Academy. Situ Xingqian had many questions in her heart, and she wanted to see him personally to clarify them. However, he seemed to have coincidentally left the imperial city these 2 days. I wonder if I can meet him here before the Qing Jiao competition ends. In the blink of an eye, it was already afternoon. There were only 4 hours left for the competition. In the arena, the Xian masters who had yet to solve the first and second formations became increasingly nervous. At this point, only by solving the first 3 formations could they hope to solve the last 2 Xian formations in the last 4 hours. Those who failed to do so were basically guaranteed to be eliminated. Plop! Someone suddenly fainted in the arena. Sun Zhongyan took a look and ordered the judges to carry the person down hurriedly. He then shook his head. Forcefully solving the Xian formation will only hurt yourself. It will only be harmful to your future cultivation. In actual fact, such a situation would happen in the Xian Master competition every year. However, no matter how much they tried to persuade them, there would always be people who refused to admit defeat and wanted to give it a try. However, Xian Masters were not warriors. Xian Masters relied more on talent and comprehension. If not, they wouldn't be able to improve much even if they studied Xian formations day and night. Reality was cruel, and no one had a choice. Finally, in this deathly silent atmosphere, someone stood up. Su Bai from Nanfeng Academy withdraws. He stood there with a pale face. His body was on the verge of collapsing, and it was obvious that he could not hold on any longer. Only one star lit up on the stone platform in front of him. The judges took back his wooden token and comforted him before letting him leave the arena. The young man's face darkened. He stared at the wooden token for a long time with reluctance before turning to leave. The onlookers did not look down on him, and only sighed at most. He's already a 1 in 1,000 talent to be able to become a Xian master. It's a pity that only a few can become top-notch Xian masters. There's always someone better than you. The path of a Xian master really places a lot of emphasis on talent. With the first person withdrawing, it was as if a hole had been torn in the hearts of the crowd. Soon there was a second and third person. Gradually, when there were only 3 hours left, half of the people in the arena had left. The rest of them were either truly talented and powerful, or they were still holding on for dear life. Bang! The stone platform in front of Sheng Yiming was the first to light up with the 4th star. He was the first to crack the 4th Xian formation and entered the last round. The people from Nanfeng Academy could not suppress their excitement. Even Fu Yinshan could not help but stroke his beard and reveal a satisfied smile. Sheng Yiming was their academy's student with the highest chance of becoming the Xian master. It seemed that he had not disappointed him. As long as he maintained this momentum, the final first place would definitely be his. Sheng Yiming's activation of the last round had undoubtedly added an invisible pressure to the others. A few more people withdrew one after another. Soon there were only a few people left in the arena. Not long after Sheng Yiming, Su Feng from Taiyan Academy also caught up. Most people's gazes were focused on the two of them. If there were no accidents, the two of them would decide the final winner. The atmosphere on Tianlu Academy's side was a little stagnant. This was because they were the only ones who had not broken through to the last round. Suddenly another person fainted. Sun Zhongyan frowned. That student was actually an outstanding Xian master from their academy. He did not know if it was because he was too anxious, but the force in his body collided, and he fainted. Now, the only person left who had a chance of continuing the competition was Si Ting. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 244. Everyone from Tianlu Academy fell silent. The others also noticed this, and started discussing in low voices. I didn't expect Tianlu Academy to only have one freshman left. I'm afraid we won't get anything this time. Not necessarily. I heard that Si Ting is the eldest young master of the Si family. He has always been talented as a Xian master. Maybe he can make a comeback in the end. I think it'll be difficult. Can't you see that he hasn't solved the 4th level yet? Sheng Yiming and Su Bai are about to finish. Right at this moment, Si Ting placed a chess piece on the board calmly. Bang! The 4th star suddenly flashed on the stone table in front of him. Everyone suddenly fell silent. They did not expect Si Ting to solve the 4th level at this time. Other than Sheng Yiming and Su Bai, he was already in the top 3. Sun Zhongyan heaved a sigh of relief. As Si Ting's master, he knew Si Ting's potential the best. Si Ting had been deliberately hiding his strength previously, so he appeared to be lukewarm. However, he seemed to have the intention to fight for first place now. Si Ting was very calm when he entered the last level, but the people around him were a little surprised. Sheng Yiming and Su Bai could not help but turn to look at him with subtle expressions. This Si Ting seemed to have underestimated him previously. Shi Wanwan, who was at the side, frowned. Her pretty face seemed to be covered with a thin layer of frost. She was originally very confident in herself, but she did not expect a freshman to beat her to it. She could not help but say, "I didn't expect you to be so good." Si Ting glanced at her and nodded expressionlessly. "Thank you for the compliment." After speaking, he retracted his gaze and looked at the chessboard in front of him again. The last level's Xian array was more difficult than the previous 4 levels. If one did not concentrate, it would be very difficult to solve it. Shi Wanwan was even angrier when she saw his reaction. She felt that Si Ting did not take her seriously at all. He was just temporarily in the lead. Did he have to be so arrogant? Shi Wanwan was unhappy, but she did not show it on her face. Right now, she had to solve the 4th level first. However, the more nervous she was, the more she could not find a way to solve the Xian array. Sheng Yiming and Su Bai were famous, but if she lost to a freshman like Si Ting, would it not be too embarrassing? After all, she was still in front of him just now. Shi Wanwan was very frustrated, but she saw that Si Ting had already started playing his chess piece, as if he was already trying to solve the problem. She glanced at Sheng Yiming again, and saw that he was staring at the chessboard. He didn't move for a long time, as if he was still hesitating. She bit her lip. It was fine if she lost, but Sheng Yiming had been waiting for this day for too long. Sheng Yiming and Su Bai seemed to have noticed Si Ting's actions, and glanced at him again. When they saw Si Ting place his chess piece calmly, their expressions changed slightly. They were all mystic cultivators, so they could naturally tell if she really knew how to do it, or if she was just pretending. Was Si Ting so powerful? Su Bai laughed inexplicably, and began to try to place a piece, muttering in a low voice. Interesting. Sheng Yiming and Shi Wanwan looked at each other, and saw the worry in each other's eyes. Shi Wanwan pursed her lips. Sheng Yiming can't lose. She lowered her eyes and looked at the chessboard for a while, but she felt that the lines in front of her had become chaotic. She held her breath and rubbed her eyebrows hard. She knew that she had reached her limit. If she forcefully tried to crack the Xian array in this state, she would only faint like the previous people, and be forced to withdraw from the competition. She was afraid that she couldn't continue in this state. Thinking of this, she gritted her teeth, and stood up suddenly. "I withdraw." Her voice was especially clear in the quiet square. Everyone looked over, and was a little surprised. Wasn't Shi Wanwan very hopeful before? Why did she withdraw at the last moment? The judges asked. Xi Wanwan, once you withdraw, it will be considered as you voluntarily giving up the competition. You can't go back on your words. Are you sure you want to withdraw? Xi Wanwan nodded firmly. I'm sure. After saying that, she lifted her foot and walked off the stage. When she passed by Si Ting, her hand moved slightly. However, this movement was too subtle, and her hand was hidden in her sleeves, so no one saw it. Si Ting, who was focused on cracking the xianarei, suddenly felt that something was wrong. He immediately raised his hand, but it was too late. On the chessboard, a transparent thread fell quietly. The moment it touched the chessboard, the thread disappeared instantly. It completely disappeared. However, the patterns on the chessboard suddenly changed. Si Ting knew that something was wrong. In the next moment, he saw the chess pieces on the chessboard fly up. Then they scattered and fell. Crackle! The chessboard, which was originally arranged neatly, was now in a mess. The crowd was in an uproar. The chessboard fell apart on its own? This usually happened when there was a serious mistake in cracking the xianarei. Wasn't Si Ting fine just now? Why did he suddenly become like this? Si Ting suddenly stood up and looked at Xi Wanwan. His voice was cold and angry. Xi Wanwan. Xi Wanwan had already walked to the edge of the arena. Her heart jumped when she heard that. But she looked very calm as she turned to look at him. What's wrong? Si Ting clenched his fists. You deliberately destroyed my xianarei. Xi Wanwan was confused. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Si Ting, you can't say such things. You can't blame me for not being able to crack the xianarei. Do you have evidence? Si Ting's face turned even colder. That thing would not leave any traces. He had focused all his attention on the xianarei just now, which gave Xi Wanwan the chance to do it. The most important thing was that he did not expect Xi Wanwan to dare to do it so openly. Fu Yinshan also frowned in dissatisfaction. That's right. You need evidence to speak. If you can't produce evidence, you can't just slander me. Si Ting clenched his fists gradually. Sheng Yiming looked up, and a trace of undetectable smugness flashed across his eyes. Su Bai narrowed his eyes and looked at Xi Wanwan meaningfully, but he did not say anything. Xi Wanwan tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled faintly. I know that you're Tianlu Academy's last hope. You really want to win. However, you can't slander me for no reason just because of this, right? Didn't I take the initiative to quit? She handed the wooden token in her hand to the referees. Her expression was relaxed, but there was a hint of mockery. There shouldn't be anyone left in your academy, right? Who said that there's no one left in Tianlu Academy? A clear voice was suddenly heard. Sun Zhongyan, and the others were shocked when they heard the voice. They immediately looked over in surprise. They saw a slender and straight figure, standing at the entrance of the arena. Tianlu Academy's Chu Luyue is here to participate in the competition. Chapter 245. It was Chu Luyue. Everyone's eyes were focused on her, and their reactions were different. Mu Hongyu and the rest immediately shouted in surprise. Luyu, you're finally here. Chu Luyue walked toward Tianlu Academy. Mu Hongyu couldn't help but rush over and grab Chu Luyue's arm. You. She really wanted to ask Chu Luyue where she had been for a day and a night, what she had experienced, and whether she was injured. However, when she thought of the countless pairs of eyes staring at her, she held it in and stared at her closely. She was so excited that she couldn't speak. Chu Luyue felt warm inside. Sorry for making you guys worry. Mu Hongyu hurriedly shook her head. It's fine as long as you're fine. Sun Zhongyan couldn't help but size up Chu Luyue. After confirming that she was fine, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Chu Luyue smiled and said, Something happened earlier. I was delayed by something yesterday. I wonder if I can continue with the competition? Sun Zhongyan immediately said, Yes, of course. Although there were only 2 hours left and Chu Luyue's chances of winning were slim, he still blurted out when he saw how calm she was. I don't think so, Cheng Han suddenly said coldly with a frown. The competition is about to end. How can she continue with the competition now? Since she's late, she has already lost the right to continue. Sun Zhongyan retorted. Brother Chunghan, the Qingjiao competition doesn't have such a rule, right? Luyu might be late, but the competition isn't over yet. Furthermore, she did sign up earlier. How can she not continue with the competition? Chunghan hated Chu Luyue to the core. Stopping her from participating was a subconscious action. When he heard Sun Zhongyan's defense, he sneered. Nothing can be accomplished without rules. If she continued to participate in the competition today, what would happen if others followed suit in the future? Wouldn't that be chaos? Sun Zhongyan laughed. That may not be the case. Among the people present, there probably weren't many who would participate in the competition, with only 2 hours left. Right? In my opinion, this is not a violation of the rules. Instead, it is a display of determination. Chunghan choked. In terms of eloquence, Sun Zhongyan was the best. He could even turn black into white. Seeing this, Fu Yinshan also disagreed and said, "That's right. Brother Zhongyan, no matter how you put it, allowing her to participate in the competition with such little time remaining is truly somewhat inappropriate." Sun Zhongyan put his hands behind his back and smiled faintly. Could it be that Brother Yunshan is afraid that Luyu will overtake your students in the last 2 hours? Fu Yinshan's face stiffened. This was a blatant provocation. However, it was really useful. If he still disagreed, wouldn't he be indirectly admitting that his student was inferior to Chu Luyue? He snorted coldly. Since you've said so, I naturally have no reason to object. However, this is the only time. Sun Zhongyan then looked at Chunghan. What do you think, Brother Chunghan? Even Fu Yunshan had agreed. If he still objected, he would appear even more petty. Chunghan waved his sleeves. Since you insist, go ahead. I really don't believe that Chu Luyue, a stage 2 Xian master, can do anything. Situ Xingchen glanced at Chu Luyue and felt uneasy for some reason. Mentor, are we really going to allow her to continue participating just like that? This doesn't seem appropriate, right? So what if it's inappropriate? Can't you see that Sun Zhongyan is clearly trying to help Chu Luyue? Chu Luyue doesn't seem to be his disciple, but for some reason, he cares a lot about Chu Luyue. As Chunghan spoke, the corners of his lips twitched in disdain. It's probably because he saw that their academy doesn't have anyone else who can participate, so he thought of a way to make up for it. However, it's really wishful thinking to let Chu Luyue help them regain their face. Let's just watch the show. If Chu Luyue can't even solve the first round, it'll be the biggest joke. Seeing that the two of them had relented, Sun Zhongyan felt more at ease. Chu Luyue said gratefully, "Thank you, Elder Sunday." Sun Zhongyan waved his hands. What's there to thank me for? Just go up. There are only 2 hours left before the competition. You just have to do your best. Don't think too much about the rest. Actually, he didn't have much hope in his heart. Chu Luyue lightly nodded. I'll definitely do my best. After saying that, she walked to the side of the referee and took her wooden token. Shi Wanwan furrowed her brows and looked at her. As she ranked behind Chu Luyue in the warrior competition the day before, Shi Wanwan was both jealous and fearful of Chu Luyue. When she saw the small red ball squatting on Chu Luyue's shoulder, she was a little fearful. So her attitude naturally wasn't as arrogant as when she was with Si Ting. She forced herself to maintain a calm expression. I thought that you wouldn't come to the Xian Master competition today, since you won first place in the warrior competition. Chu Luyue glanced at her lightly, and her lips curved up slightly. Why wouldn't I come? If I didn't come, how would I be able to see such a good show? As she spoke, her gaze seemed to sweep past Shi Wanwan's hand. Shi Wanwan was shocked. Could it be that Chu Luyue knew? How could that be? She did it so silently that even the judges standing at the side didn't notice. Chu Luyue had just returned, so how could she have seen it? She must be tricking her. Shi Wanwan revealed a somewhat stiff smile. I couldn't tell that you and Si Ting seemed to be quite close. Do you also think that I did something that caused his failure? Chu Luyue smiled even more deeply. This has nothing to do with friendship. It has to do with judgment. She seemed to have a headache as she tapped her eyes. My eyes can't bear to see dirty things. Shi Wanwan shuddered for no reason. The temperature was just right, and Chu Luyue was smiling in front of her. but she suddenly felt a chill from the bottom of her feet. It was as if she had seen through everything. She looked away nervously and guiltily, as if she didn't want to say anything more. She turned around and left. Chu Luiyue stared at her back view for a while, and found it funny. She really didn't know whether to call Shi Wanwan stupid or stupid. Did she really think that no one would notice her dirty tricks? But now was not the time to pursue this. She quickly retracted her gaze and walked towards the stage. She met Si Ting. The two of them looked at each other. Si Ting's expression was a little complicated. Finally he said, "Be careful. Just do your best." Chu Luiyue nodded with a smile. This time Si Ting was indeed a pity. According to his true abilities, he could definitely get first place. Unfortunately, the despicable Shi Wanwan appeared halfway. The two of them brushed past each other. Chu Luiyue found her position according to the number on the wooden board. On the chessboard, there weren't even any chess pieces placed. Everything seemed to have not been started yet. She held her breath and focused. With a light twist of her wrist, the lines on the chessboard changed. The first round immediately appeared in front of her. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 246. I really don't know what Chu Luiyue is thinking. Why is she participating at this time? There are only 2 hours left. What else can she do? Yeah, Sheng Yiming and Su Bai are both true geniuses. But they also spent nearly a day to solve the 4th round and enter the final round. Isn't she just making a fool of herself by coming here now? Sigh. You have to think for Tianlu Academy. They only have Chu Luiyue left now. Only one? You're saying it as if she can really win, haha. Almost everyone was not optimistic about Chu Luiyue. Even the people from Tianlu Academy were worried. Although no one said anything, the atmosphere was very solemn. This was especially so after seeing Si Ting return. Even Si Yang, who was always jumpy, did not dare to go forward and say anything. He could only obediently stay at the side and try his best to reduce his presence. He could not casually provoke Big Brother in his current mood. He clasped his hands together and started praying sincerely in his heart. Damn pervert, you must get first place. You must get first place. Suddenly, there was a commotion around the arena. Si Yang turned his head in surprise and saw that everyone was looking at Chu Luiyue with subtle expressions. He followed their gazes and immediately saw that a star had lit up on the stone platform in front of Chu Luiyue. F***CK. Si Yang rubbed his eyes hard and looked at it carefully again. That's right. Chu Luiyue had really solved the first round. She had entered the second round. Isn't this too fast? She was called a damn pervert, but she was really that perverted. Not only Si Yang, but everyone in the arena was stunned by Chu Luiyue's extraordinary speed. Wait, did I see wrongly? Chu Luiyue has actually solved the first Xian formation. No, you didn't see wrongly. I think so too. It seems to be true. It can't be. Didn't she just go up? Although the difficulty increases with each level, the first round shouldn't be so easy to solve, right? Didn't you trap a lot of people just now? How did she do it? This commotion also attracted the attention of Sheng Yiming and Su Bai. Both of them turned to look at Chu Luiyue. The first star had indeed lit up on the stone platform in front of her. As for her, her expression was still calm and collected, as if she didn't realize what a shocking thing she had just done. To be able to be so calm, he was either too focused, or he already had a card up his sleeve. Su Bai's expression was a little playful, but his eyes were a little more solemn. Sheng Yiming frowned slightly, and an inexplicable sense of irritation arose in his heart. From the first to the 4th stage, he had always been the first to clear it. However, even for him, he still spent an entire incense stick's worth of time on the first stage. However, Chu Luiyue seemed to have only glanced at it once before he unlocked it. Chu Luiyue was only a level 2 mystic cultivator, so logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for him to be this fast. Could it be that the first stage was a Xian formation that she had seen before? It seemed that this was the only reason that could explain how she could solve the first stage so quickly. Sheng Yiming suppressed the irritation in his heart and laughed somewhat self-deprecatingly. He was really too nervous. Even if Chu Luyue had coincidentally unlocked the first stage, there were still the second, third, and fourth stages. These 2 hours were simply not enough for her to catch up to him. Thinking of this, he felt slightly more at ease. However, not long after, a familiar sound sounded again. Bang! That was the sound of a Xian formation being unlocked. Sheng Yiming's heart trembled, and he almost subconsciously turned around. Sure enough, he saw that the second star had already lit up on the stone platform in front of Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue had actually successfully passed the second stage. The spectators became even more restless. The first stage was simple, so it was understandable, but how could she even unlock the second stage so quickly? This speed had already beaten everyone in the competition today. At this time, Cheng Han already felt that something was wrong. He could not help but look at Sun Zhongyan with a face full of suspicion. How could a mere level 2 mystic cultivator solve it so quickly? Could it be that she coincidentally saw a similar Xian formation before? Sun Zhongyan naturally understood what he meant, and his expression turned serious. Why, Brother Cheng Han, are you suspecting that I saw through the questions? Of course not. Brother Zhongyan has always been honest. Why would you do such a despicable thing? I'm just a little curious. How could Chu Luyue be so successful? Sun Zhongyan was so angry that he laughed instead. He raised his voice and said, although the chessboard used for the Xian Master competition was provided by our Tianlu Academy, the 5 Xian formations used in the competition were jointly decided by the 3 academies. If there's a possibility that I saw through the questions, then Brother Cheng Han and Brother Yunshan must be involved as well, right? Fu Yunshan immediately said, Brother Zhongyan, don't misunderstand. Brother Zhongyan, please don't misunderstand. I didn't mean that. However, I'm also a little curious. How exactly did Chu Luyue solve it so quickly? Sun Zhongyan sneered. What else can it be? Of course, it's because she's talented. This answer was so self-righteous that Fu Yunshan and Cheng Han did not know how to reply for a while. Seeing that the two of them still wanted to argue, Sun Zhongyan shook his sleeves. If your students can't do it, can't others do it? This sentence completely shut the two of them up. 15 minutes passed very quickly. Bang! A familiar sound rang out. Everyone looked over and saw that the third star was already shining brightly on the stone platform in front of Chu Luyue. The originally restless crowd gradually quietened down. At this point, they finally realized that Chu Luyue did not solve the Xian formation so quickly because of luck. Sun Zhongyan's words turned out to be true. Her innate talent was really rare. Chu Luyue calmly watched the chess pieces on the chessboard change. Very quickly, the fourth Xian formation appeared. This time, the people who had all sorts of suspicions completely shut their mouths. If Chu Luyue was not considered a genius, then no one would dare to call themselves that. Now they were only concerned about one thing: whether Chu Luyue could solve the 4th and 5th levels in the remaining hour. First place. The smile on Su Bai's face had already disappeared. Sheng Yiming's hand, which was holding a chess piece, also began to tremble slightly. Even without looking back, they could guess what had happened. Now they could only hope that Chu Luyue would not continue to catch up. Clack! Chu Luyue placed a chess piece. The two of them were shocked. She actually started to solve the 4th level so quickly. Immediately after, the sound of chess pieces landing on the chessboard could be heard. Chu Luyue's movements were smooth, and each sound was like a death sentence, echoing in the ears of Sheng Yiming and Cheng Han. If one looked carefully, fine beads of sweat had already seeped out of their foreheads. No, they had to solve the last few steps quickly. However, the more they thought about it, the harder it was to succeed. On the contrary, Chu Luyue's movements behind them paused, and she quieted down. Sheng Yiming and Cheng Han looked at each other, and then turned back to look. Chu Luyue was holding a chess piece, and looking at the two of them with a smile. Sorry to keep you waiting. With that, she placed a chess piece with a bang. Bang! The 4th star lit up at the same time. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 247. Everyone stared intently at Chu Luyue, and the 4 stars that lit up in front of her. She had actually solved 4 stages consecutively and reached the last stage in such a short period of time. As long as she could solve the last Xian formation successfully, she would be the first Xian master. Previously, everyone had thought that Chu Luyue entering the competition with only 2 hours left was a joke. Now they finally understood that Chu Luyue had come prepared. She clearly had the ability to fight for first place. Finally, someone could not sit still any longer. Brother Zhongyan, shouldn't you give us an explanation now? Cheng Han's face was cold, and he looked like he was looking for trouble. Let's not talk about the first 3 stages. The 4th stage is a level 4 Xian formation. Chu Luyue is only a level 2 Xian master. How could she solve it? And so quickly? I request that Chu Luyue be examined immediately. Fu Yunshang glanced at him. Although he did not say anything, he was clearly skeptical about this matter. Sun Zhongyan knew what he was thinking and immediately refused. The competition is not over yet. How can we stop? If Brother Cheng Han must be examined, then the other 2 will have to be examined too. Cheng Han sneered. I'm not the only one. Even the others here are suspicious of Chu Luyue. How could a mere level 2 Xian master be so capable? Even if she was talented, she would not be able to do this. How do you know that she would not be able to do this? Not only was Sun Zhongyan not angry, but he also looked around and revealed a meaningful smile. Everyone may have heard that Lu Yu only entered Tianlu Academy 2 months ago. However, there is one thing that you might not know. Lu Yu only started cultivating as a Xian master after she entered the academy. Looking at everyone's shocked expressions, he snorted. This means that Lu Yu only used 2 months to go from an ordinary person to a level 2 Xian master. Everyone was dead silent. Their eyes were filled with shock. Sun Zhongyan's words were too impactful and shocking. Impossible. Cheng Han was the first to react and immediately refuted. How is it impossible? Everyone in the imperial city has heard about this. Our academy's elders, teachers, and even students can testify. Sun Zhongyan smiled like a sly old fox. Could it be that so many people are saying the same thing, just to help Chu Luyue cover up her lie? Cheng Han was instantly speechless, and his mind went blank. In reality, he knew that since Sun Zhongyan dared to say this in public, it must be true. At the very least, he could confirm that what he said was true. He could not help but look at Chu. There was such a huge commotion around her. But she, the person involved, seemed to be completely unaffected by it. She continued to break the profound formation with a calm expression. The uneasiness in his heart became stronger. Of the Xian masters. Of Xian. Of Xian master. If you still have any doubts after the competition, it won't be difficult to conduct an inspection. Of Cheng Han. Of course. Of Zoff the Xian master. Cheng Han did not speak for a long time. Fu Yinshan was also shocked for a long time. After thinking about it, he could only hope that Sheng Yiming could solve the last level before Chu Luyue. Wishes were beautiful, but things often went against one's wishes. Fu Yinshan quickly realized that Sheng Yiming's condition was not very good. He sat there and stared at the chessboard, but he did not move for a long time. Even Su Bai, who was beside him, had already started to solve the last level. But Sheng Yiming did not seem to have any clue. Fu Yinshan knew Sheng Yiming very well. When he saw him like this, he immediately knew that something was wrong. Sheng Yiming was good at everything except for one thing. He was too arrogant. He wanted to do his best in everything. If he lost to someone occasionally, he would enter the academy's library and study the Xian formation. He would often not come out for a day and a night. For this Qing Jiao competition, he had prepared for a long time before the competition and was determined to get first place. But now, Chu Luyue's appearance had obviously put a lot of pressure on him. Shi Wanwan had already returned to her seat, but when she saw the situation in the arena, her heart was in her mouth again. She really should not have left so early. If she had known that there was still Chu Luyue, she would have eliminated her first. But it was too late to say anything now. She did not know if Sheng Yiming could be stabilized. Click. Chu Luyue placed another piece. There was a slight fluctuation on the chessboard in front of her. Sheng Yiming and Su Bai knew very well what this fluctuation meant. Chu Luyue had found the correct solution. As long as she was given more time, she might really be able to get first place before them. Su Bai also followed up with a piece. The same fluctuation immediately appeared on his chessboard. Sheng Yiming looked at him in shock. Su Bai just smiled and ignored him. This smile immediately made Sheng Yiming realize that Su Bai had been hiding his strength all this time. Su Bai was always behind him every time. He originally thought that it was because of the difference in strength, but he did not expect that whether it was Si Ting, Su Bai, or Chu Luyue, who had appeared now, they all seemed to be stronger than him. He thought that he was the most outstanding one, and had been advancing triumphantly. In reality, he was just a joke in their eyes. If he lost this time, Sheng Yiming clenched the chess piece in his hand tightly as his body tensed up. He tried hard to see the lines on the chessboard in front of him, but he was so anxious that he could not focus at all. As for thinking, there was no need to mention it. If this continued, click. Su Bai was one step ahead. Chu Luyue followed closely behind. They placed a piece almost at the same time. Hearing their movements, Sheng Yiming's hand trembled slightly, and he actually crushed the chess piece. This small commotion immediately attracted the attention of many people. For a moment, discussions broke out. Sheng Yiming felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. Chu Luyue looked up and glanced at him indifferently, as the corners of his mouth curled up. Even if someone like Sheng Yiming had some talent, he would not be able to go far on the path of a Xian master. Sure enough, Sheng Yiming took a deep breath and wanted to pick up another chess piece. However, his hand trembled so much that it took him a while to pick up the chess piece. He looked at the chessboard in frustration. In a moment of anxiousness, he actually placed the chess piece in a random position. The chessboard shook violently. Sheng Yiming was shocked. He had made a wrong move, and this game was ruined. Sensing the chaotic energy on the chessboard, an extremely dangerous thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Immediately, his hand swept across the chessboard uncontrollably. The chessboard was in chaos. The energy on the Xian array immediately exploded and rushed out in all directions. Chu Luyue's eyes sharpened as he picked up the chessboard. Digression. Why am I either sleeping early or losing sleep? I'm really drunk. I already owe 4 updates today. The remaining updates are at noon. I have to find time to make up for what I owe. Asterisk sob asterisk sob asterisk sob asterisk sob asterisk sob star. Chapter 248. Su Bai realized that something was wrong and quickly got up as well. But he was still a step too late. Crash. The chessboard in front of him was affected by the force of Sheng Yiming's attack, and instantly flipped over. The Xian array, which had been partially cracked, became a mess in the blink of an eye. Su Bai's face instantly turned pale. Sheng Yiming did it on purpose. He knew that he was no match for them, but he took the opportunity to destroy their Xian array and forcefully stopped the competition. He glared fiercely at Sheng Yiming. Sheng Yiming was the closest and was affected the most. He fell directly to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. However, when he saw the chess pieces scattered on the ground from the corner of his eye, he felt an inexplicable sense of relief. This time, no one could continue. The sudden situation in the arena immediately attracted everyone's attention. Fu Yinshan's expression changed when he saw Sheng Yiming's reaction. What's going on? A guilty look appeared on Sheng Yiming's face. Didin, I'm sorry. It's all because of my mistake. It's easy for you to say. Now that Su Bai's chessboard is destroyed, what should we do? How are you going to compensate him? Cheng Han was already in a bad mood. He could not hold back his anger when he saw this situation. He saw clearly that Su Bai was successfully cracking the Xian array, but he was interrupted by Sheng Yiming. As a Xian master, you should know how much energy it takes to crack a Xian array. Now, all of this has been ruined by you. Their academy's last hope was on Su Bai. It did not matter if Sheng Yiming was useless, but he actually dared to drag Su Bai down with him. Sun Zhongyan frowned and said, "Since it's like this, I'm afraid the competition will be temporarily suspended." However, Cheng Han was unwilling. The competition was going well. How can it be suspended just like that? The progress of the previous 3 people was already different. If it was restarted, it would be too unfair. He originally thought that Chu Luyue was already troublesome enough, but he did not expect Xing Yiming to be so troublesome. Sun Zhongyan was also in a bad mood. Everyone could see that Xing Yiming was starting to fall behind. Lu Yu originally had hopes of competing with Su Bai. Now that they had to redo it, Lu Yu would be at a disadvantage. This lass had been competing for the past few days, and had gone off to some unknown place last night. Now, she had directly rushed over to continue participating in the Mystic Master competition. Only the heavens knew how long that small body could last. If it weren't for the fact that they were the organizers of the Qing Jiao competition, he would have definitely caused a ruckus. Fu Yunshan was the most guilty, but since it had already come to this point, it would be wrong to retreat. He coughed and said, "This matter is indeed Yiming's fault. But now that things have come to this, I'm afraid we really can't continue. Why don't we let the children rest for a while, and we'll come up with a new profound formation test?" Sun Zhongyan and Cheng Han fell silent. Now that things had turned out this way, this was probably the only suitable compromise. Sun Zhongyan hesitated. "Since that's the case, let's do as Brother Yunshan says." Actually, he had some selfish motives in his heart. He was worried that Chu Luyue wouldn't be able to withstand the continuous rotation. If he could take advantage of this opportunity to rest, it might not be a bad idea. Xing Yiming lowered his head and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. However, a sense of joy and pride emerged in his heart. If he were to start over, he might not necessarily lose to those two. "Hold on." Chu Luyue, who had been standing at the side without saying anything, suddenly spoke. She stared at Sun Zhongyan and said word by word, "Elder son, I request for the competition to continue." Everyone looked at her in unison, their gazes strange. The competition had already become like this. How could it continue? Even Sun Zhongyan was in a difficult position. He tried to persuade Lu Yu. "I understand how you feel, but the chessboard is already destroyed. There's no way to continue the competition." "My chessboard isn't destroyed yet." Chu Luyue calmly said this sentence, but it immediately stirred up a storm in everyone's hearts. "What? Are you serious?" Sun Zhongyan exclaimed in shock. Xing Yiming also suddenly raised his head and looked at Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue opened the chessboard in her arms. The chess pieces on it didn't move at all. Even the ripples produced by the half-broken Xian formation were the same as before. Her chessboard was indeed in perfect condition. Sun Zhongyan was surprised and delighted. He never expected that Chu Luyue could actually protect her chessboard in that situation just now. Okay. Since your chessboard isn't damaged, there's naturally no reason to stop the competition. It's just that the others." Xing Yiming did not say anything, but Su Bai was really wronged. When the city gate caught fire, the fish in the moat would suffer. It did not seem good to let Chu Luyue continue the competition alone. Chu Luyue smiled faintly and asked, "Elder son, you can repair this chessboard, right?" Sun Zhongyan was taken aback. "Of course. What do you mean?" "Please help Su Bai with his chessboard. When it's repaired, I'll continue the competition with him at the same time." Sun Zhongyan's eyes lit up. Why didn't he think of that? "Su Bai, do you remember how far you've gone just now?" Su Bai nodded. "That's good. It should take half a quarter of an hour to repair it. This way, the competition would not be delayed, and it would be fair enough for everyone." With that said, he raised his hand, and Su Bai's chessboard flew toward him. A stream of light flickered on his fingertips, and the chaotic lines on the chessboard quickly became clear. Su Bai watched from the side, and carefully explained where he had cracked the chessboard previously. Sun Zhongyan's movements were extremely fast, and the entire chessboard was restored at a speed visible to the naked eye. After checking it, he returned the chessboard to Su Bai. "Take a look and see if it's done properly." Su Bai took it with both hands, carefully checked it, and bowed to Sun Zhongyan with a serious expression. "Thank you, Elder Sunday." After that, he looked at Chu Luyue and nodded. "Thank you." "You're welcome. It's just a fair competition. I don't want people to say that I won unfairly." Chu Luyue smiled faintly and found a new seat to sit down. Su Bai did not say anything more. However, his impression of Chu Luyue had greatly changed. Sheng Yiming was left in place. He was stunned for a while. Seeing that the two were about to start, he suddenly jumped up in panic. Wait a minute. My chessboard hasn't recovered yet. Even if they wanted to continue the competition, they had to wait for him to pack up, right? How could it be so sudden? Chu Luiyue rested her chin on one hand and gave him a lazy look. She smiled faintly. If I remember correctly, your Xian array collapsed just now because you cracked it wrongly, right? According to the rules, this seems to be considered elimination? Although she did not continue, everyone could hear the meaning behind her words. As a person who had already been eliminated, how could he still have the nerve to continue standing here? Sheng Yiming's words were suddenly stuck in his throat, and his face was full of excitement. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 249. He wanted to retort, but he realized that Chu Luiyue was right. Everything that had happened just now was clearly seen by the people around him. He was indeed eliminated because of his own mistake. Chu Luiyue had pointed it out so directly. No matter how thick-skinned he was, he could not continue standing on the stage. Sheng Yiming's head was spinning. For so many years, he had always been a genius that everyone envied. When had he ever been defeated so easily and left the arena in such a humiliating manner? The strong psychological disparity almost made him unable to stand steadily. Shi Wanwan, who had been watching nervously from below, sensed that something was wrong with him and hurriedly rushed over. Yiming, you're injured. Why don't you rest for a while? Fu Yunshan knew that the situation could not be salvaged, so he could only shake his head and sigh. With Shi Wanwan giving him a way out, Sheng Yiming finally regained his senses and reluctantly walked down. When he passed by Chu Luiyue, he could not help but turn his head to take a look. The girl's posture was languid as she stared at the chessboard with a calm expression. It was very different from his previous nervous and embarrassed appearance. He felt even more uncomfortable as he hurriedly retracted his gaze and left with his head lowered. Chu Luiyue gently placed a piece down and did not even look at him. Sheng Yiming wanted to fish in troubled waters, and his method was quite subtle. Unfortunately, she did not want to waste her time on such a person. As for that Shi Wanwan, they were just jackals of the same tribe. After Sheng Yiming came down, the crowd only whispered for a while before focusing their attention on the two people on the stage. The competition was about to end, and no one knew who would be the first to solve it. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the crowd. At first, Chu Luiyue did not pay much attention to the commotion, but gradually, the commotion became louder and louder, and something seemed to be wrong. She finally retracted her gaze from the Xian formation and looked up. When she looked up, she saw a familiar figure from afar. That person was dressed in white and had a black cloak draped over him. He only needed to stand there, and it seemed like he could automatically attract everyone's attention. He was a man of great talent and status. Such a description did not seem to reflect even a fraction of what he was. Many girls in the plaza looked at him with blushing cheeks, excited and nervous. On the other hand, most of the men were ashamed of themselves. Moreover, because the difference was too great, it was hard for them to even have the thought of comparing themselves. Such an immortal-like figure was truly incomparable to an ordinary person. The commotion was caused by the arrival of this man. On the field, Chu Luiyue could still clearly hear the excited whispers of many people. Who is that? Who is that? There's actually such a gentle young man in country Yaochen's capital. There's a bandit gentleman who's like to compare notes with each other. I can't believe there's really such a person. That seems to be the 7th prince of country Yaochen, who is also the frail princely. I heard that he had been recuperating at Mingyue Tianshan, and only returned to the imperial capital recently. So it's him. I thought it would be a sickly and frail person, but I didn't expect. Although it's rumored that he's always been sick, this kind of charm is enough to make countless girls go crazy, right? Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly. A monster was indeed a monster. He could easily cause such a commotion no matter where he went. However, the two of them had just parted ways in the forest outside the imperial capital. Why was he here instead of attending to his own matters? Yan Qing, who was following behind Rong Xiu, saw the commotion and blushed with shame. His master was really too much. He knew what kind of commotion his appearance would cause, yet he still made such a big fuss. Forget it. Actually, their trip this time was already considered low-key. Prince Li only brought one guard with him, so it couldn't be considered flamboyant. What was flamboyant was his master's face. When his master returned to the residence in the afternoon, there were still messy bloodstains on his body, which gave him and Umo a shock. However, his master's mood seemed to have never been better. Not only was he too lazy to pretend to be sick in the residence, but he even went out. Initially, he had some doubts, but when he saw Chu Luyue on the field, he immediately understood. Master was clearly here for someone. However, he was even more puzzled. According to what Yin Ge said, Master came back with Miss Chu in the afternoon. Why did he come to see her again after such a short time? Yan Qing naturally didn't understand. In this world, missing someone wasn't the only illness. There was also a type called possessiveness. How could Rong Xiu stay quietly after he finally brought her back? He glanced at the girl on the stage and immediately walked forward. There seemed to be an invisible aura around him. Wherever he went, the crowd automatically retreated and made a path for him. Situ Xingchen froze the moment Rong Xiu appeared. The person that she had been thinking about day and night appeared in front of her like this. It was really unexpected, as she was too surprised and overjoyed. Even the eldest princess of Xinglua was at a loss. In actual fact, they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Compared to before, that face had lost some of his youthfulness and became even more noble and cold. Her heart beat wildly, and her cheeks seemed to be burning red. She nervously checked her surroundings and secretly regretted it. If I knew that he would come today, I wouldn't have dressed casually and left the house. However, these were all small matters that were quickly washed away by the joy of seeing him again. She took a deep breath and finally called out softly when Rong Xiu walked closer. Senior Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu paused in his footsteps and looked sideways. Digression. What a fraudulent internet. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 250. Rong Xiu stopped in his tracks and looked over. When he saw Situ Xingchen, a tinge of confusion surfaced in his clear eyes. You are. It was as if Situ Xingchen's head had been drenched in cold water. Her originally excited heart instantly turned cold. However, she still forcefully maintained the smile on her face. Senior Rong Xiu, I'm Xingchen. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes as if he was trying to recall who the girl in front of him was. Yan Qing, who was behind him, reminded him softly. Your Highness, Your Highness. She's Elder Zhong Ye's niece. Upon hearing this, Rong Xiu looked enlightened. So it's eldest Princess Situ. Situ Xingchen looked at his reaction. It seemed like he really didn't remember her, and her heart turned cold. His distant and unfamiliar tone made her feel even more tormented. Ever since she knew that the Qingjiao competition was held in country, Yao Chen's imperial city, she had been imagining the scene of the two of them meeting. She had imagined this scene countless times, but she never expected it to be like this. He actually didn't recognize her at all. She took a deep breath and suppressed the disappointment in her heart. Actually, they had been separated for more than 2 years, and she looked different from before. It was normal that he didn't recognize her at first glance. After comforting herself like this in her heart, her expression gradually returned to normal. It's been a long time since we last met. Senior Rong Xiu looks even more charming than before. Rong Xiu coughed and smiled warmly. However, there was no smile in the corners of his eyes. They were still cold and distant. Eldest Princess Situ, you flatter me. My body is weak, and I'm just a medicine bottle. I really can't bear such praise. Situ Xingchen wanted to say something but stopped herself. She knew that he wasn't as weak and harmless as he looked on the surface. In the past, she had personally seen how outstanding he was. However, now was clearly not the time to talk about this. Light seemed to flash across her eyes as she softly said, Senior Rong Xiu, you're so humble. Senior Rong Xiu, you're being too polite by calling me that. Since we are from the same sect, Senior Martial Brother Rongxiu can directly call me. Eldest Princess Situ, you're wrong. Rongxiu calmly interrupted her with a smile on his lips, but his attitude was even colder. You're Elder Zhong Ye's niece, but I'm Elder Zhu Ying's disciple. Mingyue Tianshan had a total of 8 elders. They each occupied a mountain and were different from each other. Moreover, the 2 elders had been diligently cultivating in seclusion in recent years and did not have much contact with each other. It really could not be considered that they were from the same sect. Eldest Princess Situ, please take back the title of senior brother. Hearing this, the people who were originally at a loss finally understood. It turned out that these 2 were both from Mingyue Tianshan, but they didn't follow the same person. In that case, they really couldn't be considered senior brother or junior sister. Besides, everyone could tell that even though Rongxiu sounded polite, his attitude was very clear. He clearly didn't want to have anything to do with Situ Xingchen. Situ Xingchen is really being snubbed. Teacher Rongxiu. Situ Xingchen did not expect Rongxiu to cut ties with her so easily. She did not know how to reply at that moment. She had a distinguished status since she was young. No matter if it was her looks or talent, she was outstanding. Her father, mother, brother, and many others doted on her. This was especially so for the youths. When they faced her, they were either at a loss or extremely attentive. They had always treated her as the center of attention. Situ Xingchen was already used to being sought after, so she did not know what to do when Rongxiu suddenly gave her the cold shoulder. The moment she opened her mouth, she met Rongxiu's quiet, reserved, and slightly oppressive gaze. She instinctively shut her mouth, and her elegant and gentle face turned red and white. However, Rongxiu did not seem to notice her embarrassment as he turned around and walked toward Tianlu Academy's side. Yanqing glanced at Situ Xingchen and silently mourned for the eldest princess. It's not wrong to like Master, but how can Master be nice to her after offending the person in his heart? In the short period of time that Master returned to the imperial city, he already understood everything related to that person. Naturally, he also heard about how eldest princess Situ repeatedly made things difficult for Situ Xingchen. Master has a photographic memory. No matter if it's a book he has read or a person he has met, he definitely remembers everything clearly. What he did just now was just to make things difficult for Situ Xingchen. Situ Xingchen looked at Rongxiu's back view as he left. He was tall and straight but also cold and distant. Situ Xingchen dazedly took 2 steps back and did not recover her senses for a long time. Rongxiu, why are you here? Sun Zhongyan and the rest were very surprised to see Rongxiu. A few days ago, he said that he had something to settle, so he left the academy. They did not expect him to come here the moment he returned. Sun Zhongyan worriedly asked, "How are you? How's your body?" Rongxiu smiled and shook his head. "Elder Sun, don't worry. I'm fine, but I have a small matter that requires Ms. Lu Yu's help, so I specially came here." The moment he said that, not only Elder Sun, but even the surrounding people who were listening attentively were shocked. Ms. Lu Yu, isn't he talking about Chu Liyue? What does Prince Li need Chu Liyue's help for? Elder Sun was a little curious, but he did not ask further and nodded. That girl is competing now. I'm afraid it'll take a while before it ends. Rongxiu smiled lightly. It's fine. I'll just wait. After saying that, he found a seat and sat down to wait quietly. Yanqing followed and stood behind him. She did not smile and looked like an iceberg. This made many young ladies, who were interested in the weak and gentle Prince Li, calm down and wary. Prince Li seemed to have a good temper, but this cold-faced guard was not to be trifled with. Rongxiu ignored all the gazes and quietly looked at the arena, as if he was really patiently waiting for the competition to end. This situation caused many people to start discussing secretly. How does Prince Li and Chu Liyue know each other? What does he need her help with? Who knows? Prince Li has a noble status. How can we find out about him? Could it be Prince Li and Chu Liyue? I heard that Prince Li helped her out during the Crown Prince's birthday banquet. How is that possible? That must be because His Highness Prince Li is kind-hearted. How can Chu Liyue gain Prince Li's favor? She's no longer the daughter of a noble family, but her father, Chu Ning, is already the commander of the Imperial Guards. Furthermore, she's so talented. After this Qing Jiao competition, Chu Luiyue will become very popular. I don't think it's possible. Situ Xingqian naturally saw this scene as well. Her mood, which had finally recovered, was instantly affected again. She tightly gripped her sleeves and spent a lot of effort to resist the urge to go forward and ask. Others may not know, but I know. The crystal barrier that Chu Luiyue used previously is Rongxiu's. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 251. That was Rongxiu's personal item. She had stayed at Mingyue Tianshan for so long. Even though she had only seen him use it twice, she still had a deep impression of it. Hence, she could even remember the engravings on it clearly. She had secretly asked around before, and knew that Rongxiu valued the crystal barrier very much, and wouldn't easily show it to others. But now, such a precious item actually appeared in Chu Luiyue's hands. Previously, she had other suspicions, but now that Rongxiu had personally appeared, she could no longer continue lying to herself. She could only admit that Rongxiu must have taken the initiative to give it to Chu Luiyue. In other words, Rongxiu willingly gave the crystal barrier to Chu Luiyue. He looked as gentle as jade, but he was actually cold and arrogant. When had he ever taken a liking to anyone, let alone give such a precious item away? And to a girl? Situ Xingqian didn't dare to think about what it meant. Once she thought about it, her heart felt like it was being squeezed, and she felt terrible. Cheng Han had long realized that Situ Xingqian was a little off ever since Rongxiu appeared. Xingqian, you've been so unsettled these past 2 days. Is it because? Situ Xingqian was shocked and immediately shook her head. It's not because of him. Master, please don't misunderstand. I haven't said why. Cheng Han had seen all kinds of situations, so he naturally easily guessed his disciple's thoughts. Situ Xingqian was stumped. She knew that there was no point in denying it, so she pursed her lips and didn't say anything else. However, Cheng Han knitted his brows. Xingqian, you're top-notch in all aspects. Why did you? What's so good about that Rongxiu? Even though he's princely from country Yaochen, he looks so weak that he can't even stand a gust of wind, let alone cultivate. Such a person is at most an idle prince. How can he be worthy of Xingqian? So many young talents like her, but she didn't care about them. I didn't expect her to like such a person. Look at Rongxiu's attitude just now. Since when did he put the stars in his eyes? Situ Xingqian shook her head and lowered her voice in a pleading tone. Master, don't say any more. Cheng Han's heart ached when he saw her aggrieved and sad look. All right, Master won't say any more. You know what you're doing. They were here for the first place of the Qing Jiao competition and nothing else. Situ Xingqian nodded reluctantly and wanted to keep her thoughts to herself. But after all, she was the person he had been thinking about for so long. Now that he finally saw her, how could he really ignore her completely? Almost instinctively, she turned her gaze to Rongxiu. He sat there quietly, and there seemed to be a subtle aura around him that separated him from the others. That was a sense of nobility that came from his bones. He clearly looked gentle and harmless, but inexplicably made people feel reverence. Lazy, calm, and collected. Sometimes, even someone as high and mighty as her would feel ashamed of her inferiority in front of him. Some people, as long as they wanted to, seemed to be born above everything. Quite a number of people were secretly sizing up Rongxiu. However, he did not seem to notice it, or perhaps he did not even care. His pair of deep and clear eyes only looked at the arena. Situ Xingqian followed his gaze and felt sour in her heart. He's indeed looking at Chu Luiyue. Also, when he looked at me, his eyes were filled with clear gentleness. Even though it was just a flash, I still saw it. She secretly gritted her teeth, but the waves in her heart could not be calmed down for a long time. Seeing Rongxiu appear here, Chu Luiyue found it strange at first, but after hearing what he said to elder son, she guessed it. She raised her brows slightly and decisively retracted her gaze, focusing on the chessboard again. Now it's better to solve the last Xian formation first. As she thought about it, she placed another piece. Su Bai, who was at the side, could not help but glance at her, and a complicated expression flashed across his eyes. He had already guessed that Chu Luiyue was extremely talented as a Xian master, but he did not expect it to be to this extent. He watched as Chu Luiyue continued to solve the Xian formation smoothly, and then looked at the chessboard in front of him, which had not moved for a long time. He had already guessed the final result in his heart. In reality, from the moment Chu Luiyue preserved his chessboard perfectly, he already knew that he might not be Chu Luiyue's opponent. He pinched his brows and laughed bitterly. The piece in his hand did not land for a long time. Time seemed to be exceptionally unbearable, but it also seemed to pass very quickly. Su Bai felt that he had only been in a daze for a while. When he looked up again, he was shocked to realize that there was only a little bit of time left. Seeing that Su Bai was not going to make it, Cheng Han spoke first. If neither of them can solve the last Xian formation until the end of the competition, they can only be considered to be tied for second place. Brother Zhongyan, am I right? Sun Zhongyan hesitated for a moment. He could clearly see that Chu Luiyue was now ahead of Su Bai, but he was still a little short of solving the Xian formation. According to the rules, if one could not solve all the levels within the specified time, then even if they had the best results, they could only be considered second place and not first place. If the two of them were tied for second place, then it would be a bit of a loss for Chu Luiyue. After thinking for a moment, he nodded in agreement. Brother Cheng Han is right. Unfortunately, Chu Luiyue had come a little too late. If she had come an hour earlier, or even an hour earlier, she would definitely be able to solve the last level of the Xian formation. It's pretty good that the two of them are tied for second place. At least they did not lose. If Chu Luiyue could get this ranking, it would be a pleasant surprise. Su Bai looked up at the clock. There was not much time left, and only a small part of the chessboard in front of him had been solved. He smiled helplessly and directly put down the chess piece in his hand. Chu Luiyue, who was at the side, noticed the commotion and turned to look at him with raised brows. Su Bai actually chose to give up at this time. It seems that you and I are really going to be in the same place. Su Bai laughed self-deprecatingly. He thought that he would definitely get first place. Unfortunately, a perverted freshman like Chu Luiyue had appeared. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. Sorry, I don't like to be second place. Su Bai was stunned for a moment, and then he saw Chu Luiyue put down a chess piece. Almost at the same time, another chess piece appeared in her other hand. Immediately after, another chess piece fell. She was actually holding a chess piece with both hands. One had to know that this was not a real chess game, but a Xian formation. Every chess piece contained a different origin power. Once there was a mistake, the entire Xian formation would be affected and even collapse directly. Chu Luiyue was actually so bold. She thought that one hand was not enough, so she used two at the same time. Was she not afraid that if she was not careful and made a mistake, her efforts would be in vain? Chu Luiyue did not seem to care about everything around her at all. Her hands quickly overlapped, and the sound of chess pieces falling down almost became a string. Finally, the referee raised his voice. Time's up, bang. The last Xian formation broke with a sound. On the stone platform in front of Chu Luiyue, the fifth star suddenly lit up and shone brightly. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 252. Chu Luiyue actually managed to solve the last round at the last moment. She was the only person who managed to pass the Xian Master competition. Everyone had different reactions when they saw the 5 shining stars. Some were shocked, some were surprised, some were happy, and some were annoyed. However, they were all in disbelief at Chu Luiyue's actions. One had to know that she had only used 2 hours to solve 5 Xian arrays from the time she rushed to the competition to the end. Even those who had doubts about her before had to admit that Chu Luiyue's talent as a Xian master was indeed rare. Chu Luiyue stood up and smiled politely at Su Bai. Thank you for letting me win. Su Bai smiled bitterly. How did he let her win? I admit defeat. I accept my loss wholeheartedly. Su Bai was calm. He took a deep breath and cupped his hands. In fact, he had already lost the moment Chu Luiyue protected the chessboard. Chu Luiyue was stronger than he had imagined. Everyone looked at this scene in a daze. Sun Zhongyan was the first to react, and his heart thumped excitedly. I hereby announce that the champion of this year's Qingjiao competition is Chu Luiyue from Tianlu Academy. Everyone had heard similar words the day before. However, no one had expected that Chu Luiyue would win first place in the Xian Master competition after taking first place in the warrior competition. Damn pervert, you really don't leave anyone else a way out. Xiyang let out a long howl. He had a premonition that the gap between him and Chu Luiyue would only widen in the future. Not only him, but the others also felt the same way. This kind of person was born to make others envious, jealous, and hate, right? Mu Hongyu and the others finally heaved a sigh of relief and cheered excitedly. Up until now, Tianlu Academy had won first place in both rounds of the Qingjiao competition. Most importantly, it was Chu Luiyue who won. This time, she had completely outshone everyone in the Qingjiao competition. On the other hand, the atmosphere in the other two great academies was somewhat cold. When Sheng Yiming heard Sun Zhongyan's announcement, he finally couldn't take it anymore. His qi and blood surged, and his eyes rolled back as he fainted. Shi Wanwan quickly supported him. Yiming, Yiming, how are you? Fu Yinshang glanced at him. He was a little frustrated and disappointed. He just fainted because he couldn't take the blow. Just bring him back and let him rest. It was one thing to lose in public, but why did it have to come to this? It was too embarrassing. Sheng Yiming's character really needed to be changed. Oh, good. This student will bring him back now. Shi Wanwan was worried about Sheng Yiming, so she didn't notice Fu Yunshan's dissatisfaction. She waved at the people next to her, asking them to help take Sheng Yiming away. However, just as he turned around, he heard a somewhat familiar voice. Please wait. Shi Wanwan's heart skipped a beat. She stopped and looked back. Chu Luiyue crossed his arms and looked at him with a smile. But that smile made Shi Wanwan feel even more uneasy. She guiltily avoided Chu Luiyue's gaze and asked uncertainly, Are you calling me? Are you calling me? Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. Of course. There's something here that I need you to explain. Shi Wanwan instantly panicked. Was Chu Luiyue going to expose that matter in public? No. She did it secretly, and no one noticed at all. Also, that thing couldn't leave any evidence. Even a level 5 Xian master like Sun Zhongyan definitely wouldn't be able to find anything strange. Even Si Ting had no choice but to admit defeat. Shi Wanwan calmed down a little and forced a smile. Oh, what is it? If it's not urgent, why don't we talk about it later? Yiming is unconscious now. We have to send him back as soon as possible. It's nothing serious. He'll be fine soon. As Chu Luiyue spoke, he suddenly looked at Si Ting. Si Ting, you were having a good match just now. Why did the chessboard suddenly collapse? Si Ting was stunned. He didn't expect Chu Luiyue to be talking about this. He pursed his lips. If he didn't have any evidence, it would be useless to accuse her directly. Instead, he would drag Chu Luiyue down with him. Hearing Chu Luiyue call Si Ting's name, Rong Xiu's thin lips curved into a faint smile. This little thing actually wanted to stand up for someone else. Yan Qing shivered inexplicably and felt his master's aura turn cold. He immediately lowered his head and tried his best to minimize his presence. However, Chu Luiyue had already picked up the chessboard that Si Ting had used during the match. I look at this thing. It doesn't seem right. A thought suddenly flashed across Si Ting's mind. Could Chu Luiyue provide evidence? He stepped forward and said in a low voice, My chessboard collapsed because Shi Wanwan tampered with it. Si Ting, you can't spout nonsense. Shi Wanwan was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Her voice rose an octave. So many people are watching. How could I possibly do such a thing? That's right. So many people are watching, but you still dared to do it in public. Your mental fortitude is extraordinary. Even I am impressed. Chu Luiyue praised her sincerely. It seemed that if she wasn't holding the chessboard in her hand, she would have applauded Shi Wanwan. Shi Wanwan was so angry that her face turned red. Seeing how confident Chu Luiyue was, her originally calm heart started to sway again. Could it be that Chu Luiyue really had a way? Lu Yu, what did you find? Sun Zhongyan asked with a frown. He also knew that Si Ting had been eliminated for no reason, so he did suspect Shi Wanwan. However, he didn't find any clues, so he didn't pursue the matter. He planned to ask Si Ting in detail after the match. He didn't expect Chu Luiyue to beat him to it. Nothing much. I just found that there seems to be something extra on the chessboard. As Chu Luiyue spoke, she knocked on the chessboard with one hand. Shi Wanwan stared at it intently. There was nothing on the smooth and clean chessboard. Chu Luiyue was obviously tricking her. She sneered, feeling a little more confident. Chu Luiyue, you said that there is something extra on the chessboard. I wonder what it is exactly. Why is there nothing on the chessboard? Everyone else was confused as well. They didn't know what Chu Luiyue was referring to. Chu Luiyue smiled meaningfully. You will find out soon. With that, she waved her finger. An array of silver light suddenly appeared. Then, her finger gently brushed across the chessboard. A faint mark was left on the chessboard. She moved her finger gently, as if she was drawing something. On the originally plain chessboard, a pattern gradually lit up. The light overlapped and it was clear and bright. Sun Zhongyan widened his eyes slightly. That was actually the last Xian formation on the chessboard. Chu Luiyue actually restored that Xian formation again. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 253. Sun Zhongyan was not the only one. All the Xian masters present were stunned. They all knew how complicated the last Xian formation on the chessboard was. It would be difficult for them to trace it bit by bit, let alone redraw it. Furthermore, Chu Luiyue was tracing it bit by bit from the end to the front. This was many times more difficult than memorizing a book backward. However, Chu Luiyue seemed to remember it clearly. Every stroke was smooth and natural. Even if she deciphered the Xian formation, she shouldn't be able to remember it completely. Even the people from Tianlu Academy could not help but whisper among themselves. Has she really seen that Xian formation before? It seemed like this was the only explanation for how she could decipher the Xian formation so quickly and repair it completely. Dong Fangqing coughed. Don't you guys know that this girl has a photographic memory? During the meditation class, although Chu Luiyue kept a low profile, he had observed her a few times and realized that any Xian formation did not seem to be a problem for Chu Luiyue. As long as she wanted to, not only could she decipher it quickly, but she could also trace out the Xian formation's patterns completely. Whether she could use a high-grade Xian formation was another matter. After all, she could not release such a powerful and abundant energy at her current cultivation level. However, she knew exactly how to trace out each strand of energy. Dong Fangqing clearly remembered that once, Chu Luiyue seemed to be bored in class, so she sat in her seat and played with the chessboard repeatedly. He unintentionally glanced at it and noticed that she was tracing out the Xian formation. From then on, he knew that this girl was not simple. This was also why he hoped that Chu Luiyue would participate in this Xian master competition. Really, even Sun Zhongyan was in disbelief. He did not interact much with Chu Luiyue normally. Other than the midterm assessment, he had not seen Chu Luiyue's performance on Xian formations. Looking at it now, it really was true. But what is she trying to do? They soon found out why Chu Luiyue was doing this. After Chu Luiyue redrew the profound formation stroke by stroke, he suddenly stopped. If I'm not wrong, this is where you came to just now, right? She showed the chessboard to Si Ting. Si Ting was extremely surprised as he nodded. Not bad. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up as she looked at Shi Wanwan. When Shi Wanwan saw the chessboard restored by Chu Luiyue, her back was already drenched in cold sweat. Chu Luiyue gently waved her finger, and an indistinct line was lifted from the chessboard by her. Shi Wanwan, do you know what this is? The object in Chu Luiyue's hand was only about an inch long. Although it was transparent, it reflected some light under the sunlight, so everyone could vaguely recognize it. That is, Sun Zhongyan's expression changed. Silver Soul Hook. When they heard the three words Silver Soul Hook, many people revealed shocked expressions. It was rumored that this object was made from the rare sky snow silk. It was soft and transparent, but it was extremely tough. It was even sharper than a sword. However, this object had a huge flaw. It could only be used once. Once it was used, this silver soul hook would become extremely weak and completely useless. However, from a certain perspective, this was also one of its advantages. At least, it was very suitable as a hidden weapon. It was very destructive, and it would not leave any clues. As long as one waited for a while, it would completely melt. There would be no trace of it. However, the sky snow silk was extremely precious. Ordinary people had not even seen it before, let alone used it. These chessboards were all checked before they were brought to the competition. They would definitely not be mixed with this kind of thing. Sun Zhongyan immediately realized something and looked at Shi Wanwan sternly. Shi Wanwan, how do you explain this? Shi Wanwan was completely stunned when Chu Luiyue lifted the silver soul hook. Her body was cold, and her mind was buzzing. She almost could not hear what Sun Zhongyan was saying. Her face was abnormally pale, and she subconsciously denied it. I don't know. That's not mine. Chu Luiyue gently moved the silver soul hook in his hand and said lazily, It's fine if you don't admit it. It doesn't matter if you don't admit it. Those who have touched the silver soul hook will have a faint silver color on their hands. Do you dare to show me your hands? Shi Wanwan trembled, and her hands subconsciously curled up in her sleeves. How did she know? How did she know? I didn't. Shi Wanwan was still refuting, but everyone could tell that something was wrong with her guilty look. Fu Yunshan's expression was also ugly. A clean conscience is not afraid of a crooked shadow. Wanwan, you just need to show your hands, and you can prove your innocence. Shi Wanwan was extremely anxious. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to show her hands. Dean, please believe me. I really didn't do it. Fu Yunshan saw her reaction and understood everything. Shi Wanwan must have secretly used the silver soul hook. When deciphering a Xian formation on the chessboard, every force is exquisite. One wrong move will cause the entire game to be lost. If a silver soul hook were to drop now, it would be unimaginable. Chu Luiyue sighed and shook his head. Such a small thing is worth a lot of money. It's gone just like that. What a pity, Shi Wanwan. Do you still want to deny it? Shi Wanwan couldn't say a word as she collapsed to the ground. She looked at Chu Luiyue in a daze. She couldn't understand how the silver soul hook was discovered, and how Chu Luiyue found it. She only knew that her future was completely over now that this matter was exposed. Fu Yunshan was also infuriated and shouted angrily. He shouted, Why did you do that? You've really disgraced Nanfeng Academy. To think that he had spoken up for Shi Wanwan earlier. Now, it was like a loud slap to his face. Shi Wanwan's tears fell like pearls from a broken necklace. It's all my fault. Please punish me, Dean. But please don't implicate others. Sun Zhongyan said in a low voice. Brother Yunshan, you have to give an explanation for this matter, right? Fu Yunshan had never been so humiliated before. He just wanted to kill Shi Wanwan with one slap. He took a deep breath and said, Shi Wanwan was unscrupulous. Her methods are despicable. From today onwards, she will be expelled from Nanfeng Academy. She will never be hired again. Shi Wanwan seemed to have been struck by lightning. Under the strong impact, she also fainted. Fu Yunshan didn't even want to look at her. He suppressed the anger in his heart and cupped his hands at Sun Zhongyan and Cheng Han. I didn't take care of this matter properly. I'm sorry. Since Fu Yunshan had already made his stance clear, the others naturally couldn't say anything else. Chu Luiyue pressed her fingers lightly, and the useless silver soul hook instantly turned into powder. She put down the chessboard and walked off the stage. Si Ting was about to step forward and thank her personally when a low laugh came from the side. Miss Lu Yu, now that you've helped everyone else, can you do me a favor now? Digression. It's about 9:30 p.m. Isn't it too late to take a big step today? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 254. Si Ting looked over. It was the 7th Prince Rong Xiao. Prince Li, the Honorable Prince Li. He was also someone she liked. He stopped in his tracks and did not walk forward. Even he had to admit that Prince Li, who had not been in the capital city for a long time, was indeed very handsome. Si Yang could not help but nudge Si Ting with his elbow and mumbled, "He's just a medicine man. He's just a medicine jar. I really don't know what that damn pervert likes about his face. What's the use of a man being so good-looking?" When he first heard Chu Luiyue say that she liked Princely, he was very indignant. His elder brother was much better than him in every way, except for his status. Moreover, his elder brother was going to be the head of the Si family in the future. Seriously speaking, his status was not that low. He really did not know what Chu Luiyue was thinking. Si Ting glanced at him with an indifferent expression. Si Yang knew that he had said something wrong, and quickly shut his mouth. However, he did not know that Si Ting was thinking the exact opposite of him. His Highness Princely was known for his weak body and lack of real power. He didn't even have much talent in cultivation. Even so, she still liked him. No matter how good other people were. What could she do if she did not like them? Moreover, he felt that this prince was different from what the rumors said. He sensed a faint threat from Rong Xiao. It was definitely not the aura of someone who was bedridden all year round. Chu Luiyue did not notice the tension between the two of them, and walked over to Rong Xiao. "Rong, why are you here? What can I do for you?" Rong Xiao smiled faintly. "Just a small favor. However, I have to trouble Miss Lu Yu to come with me." Chu Luiyue thought to herself. They had only been separated for less than 4 hours. What was so urgent that he had to come to her for help? He was obviously doing it on purpose. However, when she saw Rong Xiao's gentle gaze, her heart softened and she felt a faint bittersweet feeling. The corners of her mouth curled up. "Since your Highness has spoken, I naturally have no reason not to help." Rong Xiao's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. If it wasn't for the fact that everyone was still around, he would have already stepped forward and carried her away. Sinhu scratched his head and looked at the two people who were about to leave. "Lu Yu, are you leaving already? Aren't you going to celebrate with us?" Yesterday, when Chu Luiyue won first place in the warrior competition, they wanted to celebrate for her. However, after considering that she still had a Xian Master competition today, they temporarily delayed it. Today, she won first place in the Xian Master competition again. No matter what, she had to drink properly. "Didn't you say last time that we were going to Phoenix Restaurant?" Ouch. Sinhu held the back of his head and looked at Mu Hongyu pitifully. Why did she hit him? Mu Hongyu flashed him a toothy smile. "His Highness needs Lu Yu's help. How can we delay? As for the celebration, it's the same if we wait for Lu Yu to come back." Sinhu didn't understand, but when he saw the faint murderous intent in Mu Hongyu's eyes, his desire to live was still very strong. Yes, go ahead. We will wait for you." Mu Hongyu looked at Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao with bright almond-shaped eyes. She felt that she seemed to have guessed where Lu Yu went yesterday. Chu Luiyue trembled under her gaze. "Then I'll be right back." With that, she left with Rong Xiao. Yan Qing followed closely behind. "I heard that the thing that caught my eye at Jinbao Pavilion last time has something to do with Miss Lu Yu," Rong Xiao said casually. Realization dawned on those who vaguely heard it. So it had something to do with Jinbao Pavilion. No wonder. Who in the Imperial City didn't know that Chu Luiyue and Jinbao Pavilion had a special relationship? Even Crown Prince Rongjin and 4th Princess Rongjin didn't get any benefits from Jinbao Pavilion. Princely was so cautious and directly asked Chu Luiyue for help. It seemed quite wise. Situ Xingqian clenched her teeth so hard that they almost broke. She spent a lot of effort to control her emotions. Others didn't think much of it, but in her eyes, the duo's every word and action was extremely glaring. Help. It's probably just an excuse. She never knew that the cold and arrogant Rong Xiao would look at a girl with such a gaze. Gentle, loving, and doting. If this didn't prove that there was something between the two of them, Situ Xingqian felt her nose sting. She thought that even if Rong Xiao didn't have any romantic feelings for her, he would at least treat her as someone from the same sect. After all, they had stayed at Minghua Tianshan for so long. However, everything that happened today woke her up from her beautiful dream. He doesn't even remember who I am. His gaze was so cold and indifferent that it was as if he was looking at a stranger. Mentor, I'm not feeling well. I'll go back first. said Situ Xingchen softly. Chung Han sighed. That's good too. The celestial physician competition is tomorrow. Go back and rest well, and prepare yourself. Situ Xingchen nodded in response, and quickly turned around to leave. Chu Luihua followed Rong Xiu out, and saw a familiar horse carriage. Rong Xiu came out in a horse carriage? Come to think of it, he's still that weak Prince Li in the eyes of the imperial city's people. Yin Qing had already gone forward to ride the horse. Rong Xiu walked over, and personally lifted the curtain. However, Chu Luihua didn't move. His gaze slowly swept across Rong Xiu's body, especially stopping at his sleeves and the corners of his clothes. He seemed to smile. Your Highness, the pattern on your clothes is really unique. Is this the only one in the world? Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes. I'm so jealous. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.